Chapter 646. Along with the sound coming from the ground, the entire ground began to shake. It was like the shaking of an earthquake. All the houses and buildings began to shake violently. Huge cracks began to appear on the ground. Hundreds and thousands of vines stretched out from the cracks. These vines were not formed by the vines of plants, but by the condensation of soil. Each of these vines was about 10 meters thick. They were like giant pythons, crawling toward the ground. Then, they slowly raised their heads and climbed toward the sky. When their heads reached the highest point, they intertwined with each other. Then, a human figure condensed from the heads of those giant pythons. It looked like it was formed by the vines of soil. In fact, because it was of the earth attribute, its cells could integrate with the soil very well. On the surface, it looked like it was formed by the soil. In fact, it was only because the soil covered its tracks that it gave people a very shocking feeling. The people in the 10,000 poison city were all dumbstruck when they saw this. It did not look like teleportation. It was transformation. A human could turn into soil, and then soil could turn into a giant dragon. This was a little too King mysterious. However, Mo, who had the demonic dragon's eye, could easily see this point. He did not show any surprise on his face. He carefully sized up the guy. He saw that the guy was dressed in yellow clothes and looked to be about 12 or 13 years old. His face still had a childish look. However, his eyes looked as if they had traveled through thousands of years. It was actually a child's face. This once again caused a burst of exclamations from the giant dragons present. They thought that such a powerful poison king would be an adult or even an old man. They did not expect him to be a child who looked to be in his teens. In the 10,000 dragons star zone, the human form was just another skin of the giant dragons. If they wanted to, they could use several methods to make their human appearance look very young. However, ordinary giant dragons would not do this. Because it was purely unnecessary to take off one's pants and fart. If they fought, they would still transform into their dragon form. Now, the Poison King was just a child who looked to be in his teens. This still surprised the giant dragons. Mo looked at the Poison King from head to toe and then looked at the people in the city. He sneered and said, "Those who stand in my way will die." The Poison King laughed, "What arrogance! Today, I will protect them." Since they didn't see eye to eye, he naturally didn't say anything more. Mo didn't say anything else. He waved his right hand in the air. 2 balls of dark green energy condensed in his hands. The 2 balls of dark green energy quickly took shape. They formed 3 dark green dragons that were more than 20 meters long. The claws, fangs, tails, wings, and eyes of the 3 dark green dragons were all very lifelike. Its eyeballs could even move around like a real dragon. At first, the 3 dark green dragons were only about 20 meters long, but as Mo continued to pour energy into them, their bodies began to grow rapidly. With Mo's current strength, he could only execute the 3rd transformation of the lone dragon. The 3 dragons quickly reached a length of 100 meters. Of course, the Poison King also sensed the enormous energy within the 3 dragons. He knew that Mo was going to use a big move. He wouldn't let Mo condense the 3 dragons. Thus, he raised his right hand in the air. In an instant, more than 10 Earth-type vines condensed on the ground and wrapped around Mo. However, when the Earth-type vines were about to reach Mo, they suddenly slowed down. They were so slow that no one could see them moving forward. From the visual effect, it looked as if Mo was doing nothing. When the Earth-type vines reached Mo, they suddenly stopped. Seeing this, the Poison King frowned. There was extreme disbelief in his voice. Time attribute? This guy actually had the time attribute. The Poison King had lived for so long, but he had never seen a guy with the time attribute. Now, he actually encountered a guy with the time attribute. The most unbelievable thing was that this guy clearly had 3 attributes. How could he have the time attribute? One had to know that in the history of the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone, there had never been a dragon with 4 attributes. In other words, this guy had already broken through history. Even so, the Poison King couldn't let Immortal condense the 3 poison-type dragons like this. He waved his right hand again, and hundreds of huge cone-shaped rocks on the ground flew toward Immortal in the sky. These cone-shaped rocks were like the tip of a spear, but each one was 100 meters long. However, these cone-shaped rocks stopped when they were 100 meters away from Immortal. Then, they stopped moving. Because the space around these cone-shaped rocks was confined by Immortal. They couldn't move forward, they couldn't move backward, they couldn't go up, they couldn't go down. Seeing this, the Poison King couldn't help but be angry, a mere rank 8. What do you think I am? As he spoke, he waved his hand again, and the huge cone-shaped rocks rose into the air again. It was as if someone was exerting a force on these cone-shaped rocks out of thin air. He wanted to use the fact that he was 2 ranks higher than Immortal to forcibly break through Immortal's spatial confinement. This was the natural suppression of ranks. Even if your attributes were strong, when the opponent was 2 ranks higher than you, many of your skills would be forcibly broken through by the opponent's brute force. At this moment, Immortal raised his head and looked at the 3 poison-type dragons. He saw that the 3 poison-type dragons had already finished absorbing the energy. Next was the expansion period. He didn't need to worry about them anymore. Thus, a large amount of chaotic energy appeared in his left hand, and a large amount of black energy appeared in his right hand. These 2 types of energy intertwined in the air, quickly forming a huge black hole with a diameter of more than 50 meters. Time in his left hand, space in his right. Time and space intertwined. That huge black hole was like the mouth of a giant beast, rapidly swallowing everything around it. The huge cone-shaped rocks that were attacking Immortal were easily swallowed into the black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King was slightly surprised. What kind of skill was this? He had never seen it before. But it didn't matter. As long as the level was high enough and the energy was large enough, it could forcibly break through any of this guy's skills. Thus, he directly released a large amount of Earth-type energy and condensed it into an Earth-type giant. This Earth-type giant was more than 500 meters tall. It looked like it had a very shocking visual effect. Of course, compared to Immortal's dragons, this Earth-type giant was far less realistic. Immortal's dragons were like extremely detailed and realistic figurines. On the other hand, the Poison King's Earth attribute giant was like a rough sculpture with only the outline and no details added. Chapter 647. It was the Poison King's Earth attribute giant. His purpose was to use brute force to break through Immortal's spacetime black hole. He felt that as long as his level was higher than Immortal's, he would be able to crush Immortal with brute force. However, was that really the case? His Earth attribute giant ignored Immortal's spacetime black hole and directly attacked Immortal's body. However, when the Earth attribute giant passed through the spacetime black hole, a huge suction force attacked the Earth attribute giant. The Earth attribute giant's head was almost instantly sucked into the spacetime black hole. However, another head quickly condensed on the Earth attribute giant's neck. At the same time, there was an endless stream of stones on the ground that replenished the giant's body. The giant's body became even bigger and was now close to 600 meters tall. Immortal was slightly surprised. In the past, as long as he used the spacetime black hole, he was basically invincible. This time, he had encountered a tough opponent. It seemed that the higher the level, the stronger the strength, and the more powerful the energy. This was an unchanging truth. However, it was a pity that the guy was just a spacetime super-evolved dragon. If he was an ancient dragon, he might really be able to break through his spacetime black hole. It was not just possible, but definitely possible. Of course, Immortal was only guessing. He had never seen an ancient dragon before, so he didn't know how powerful an ancient dragon was. At the same time, he felt that it was necessary to strengthen his training of the time attribute and space attribute as soon as possible. It was very difficult for his level to rise to that of an ancient dragon in a short period of time. Therefore, it was necessary to train these two attributes. If he understood these two attributes better, his space-time black hole would be more powerful. Then, if he really encountered an ancient dragon, he would have a slight chance of winning. As Emosure continued to inject the time attribute and space attribute energy into the space-time black hole, the diameter of the black hole became bigger and bigger, reaching twice its previous size. At the same time, the suction force from the space-time black hole became stronger. The buildings, people, trees, and even the dragons on the ground were all sucked in. The huge suction force kept pulling at the giant. Although the Earth attribute giant was now 1,000 meters tall, he still seemed unable to resist the suction force of the space-time black hole. He desperately tried to attack Emosure, but his upper body was constantly being pulled towards the black hole. Although there were still a large number of stones on the ground that were rapidly replenishing the giant's body, and the giant was still constantly growing in size, it was still unable to withstand the devouring power of the space-time black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King teleported behind Emosure. He wanted to interrupt Emosure's replenishment of the space-time black hole. However, Emosure had already expected this. The moment he appeared, Emosure teleported to the edge of the black hole. Then, he looked at the Poison King provocatively. "Come over if you have the ability." Although the space-time black hole could devour everything, it did not pose a threat to Emosure because it originated from Emosure. When the Poison King saw this, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get away with it. In a flash, he wanted to leave this place. However, his figure flashed twice, but he was unable to leave at all. Because he suddenly realized that the entire space seemed to have been locked. Damn it! He cursed in his heart and hurriedly fell towards the ground. He was a poison attribute giant dragon and an earth attribute giant dragon. As long as he was in contact with the ground, he could use earth escape and go wherever he wanted. No one could stop him. When he fell towards the ground, Emosure did not stop him. Instead, he looked at him with a mocking smile. The Poison King's head was down and his feet were up. Like a diver, he plunged towards the ground. However, when he was 50 meters away from the ground, a huge black hole with a diameter of 100 meters suddenly appeared on the ground. At this moment, the Poison King was sinking towards the center of the black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King's expression changed greatly. What was going on? The black hole was clearly about 5 kilometers away from him. Why did it suddenly appear on the ground in front of him? With how much effort it took for that guy to condense a black hole, it was impossible for him to condense a second one in such a short time. However, he had no time to think about this. He hurriedly transformed into a poison dragon that was nearly 10,000 meters long. This poison dragon looked as if he had traveled through time and space. His old skin and his weathered eyes looked as if he had already existed since the beginning of the world. However, at this moment, his weathered eyes revealed a look of extreme fear. He flapped his giant wings that were nearly 10,000 meters wide and wanted to escape into the distance. However, a huge suction force came from behind him. His tail was already sucked into the black hole. He did not feel anything, but this made him extremely terrified. After all, no one knew what was inside the black hole. Would it be death or another world inside the black hole? People were always full of fear towards things that they were unfamiliar with. At this moment, the guy was extremely terrified. He flapped his wings with all his might, but it seemed to be useless. The huge suction force of the black hole had already swallowed his entire tail, followed by his butt, and then his pair of hind legs. No, the guy's throat erupted with a horrified roar that sounded like the beginning of the universe. This roar seemed to be able to penetrate the entire planet. However, his body was still being swallowed by the black hole. In fear, he stretched out his wings as if he wanted to use his wide wings to block the black hole's entrance. However, he was still too naive. His wings were quickly swallowed as soon as they touched the edge of the black hole. The black hole did not care about your size. Of course, the black hole also had a capacity, but this capacity was so large that it was unimaginable. If Immortal did not care and allowed this black hole to develop, it would slowly swallow the entire planet and even the entire galaxy. At this moment, Immortal just smiled faintly. Therefore, it was ridiculous to want to use his wings to block the black hole's entrance. Seeing that he could not escape, the Poison King hurriedly begged Immortal, "Little guy, let me go. I have lived for more than 50,000 years and know many secrets of the planet. If you let me go, you will benefit for the rest of your life." Immortal did not pay attention to him at all. The Poison King's front claws kept flapping around, but it was useless. Finally, after a minute, the Poison King's figure disappeared into the black hole. At this moment, the Poison King that once terrified the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone was finally gone. When the people in the 10,000 Poison City saw that the Poison King was dead, they were all terrified and hurriedly fled in all directions. Chapter 648. 648. With a single move, countless lives were lost. Immortal's black hole swallowed the Poison King. When the residents of Myriad Poison City saw this, their expressions changed drastically as they fled in all directions. In the past, the city of Myriad Poisons had been a paradise for these desperados. It was their shelter, their harbor from the storm. However, the current Myriad Poison City was hell for them. Immortal watched as the residents of Myriad Poison City fled in all directions. He wasn't worried at all. He waved his hands lightly, and the black hole on the ground disappeared. If this black hole was allowed to continue swallowing, forget about Myriad Poison City. The entire Myriad Poison planet and the entire galaxy would probably be swallowed up. At the same time, the three giant poison dragons in the sky had already reached 10,000 meters long. In the next moment, the three giant poison dragons flew toward the ground at the same time. At almost the same time, the giant poison dragons fiercely stabbed into the ground. In the next moment, it was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. The entire Myriad Poison City, which was hundreds of kilometers in radius, was instantly swallowed up by the dark green shockwave. The shockwave quickly spread in all directions. All the buildings, animals, plants, and giant poison dragons were sucked into it. The creatures, buildings, stones, and wood that were sucked into the shockwave were all corroded into nothingness in a short period of time. Even the ground was corroded to a thickness of 5 meters. At the same time, a dark green mushroom cloud soared into the sky. If you had seen an atomic bomb before, you would be able to imagine the current situation. However, the smoke and shockwave formed by the atomic bomb here were all dark green in color. The shockwave continued to spread in all directions. None of the residents of Myriad Poison City were able to escape. The moment they were swallowed by the shockwave, they were corroded. Their flesh was corroded until only their bones were left. In the end, even their bones were corroded into nothingness. Immortal, who was in the sky, could only hear a series of miserable screams. However, his face was expressionless. For the residents of Myriad Poison City, Immortal's arrival was the end of the world. Moreover, the poison dragon's third transformation was far more powerful than this. The shockwave of the explosion destroyed the entire Myriad Poison City. However, the poison dragon's third transformation's greatest power lay in the mushroom cloud formed by the explosion. The mushroom cloud quickly spread in the sky, forming dark green smoke that enveloped an area of 10,000 kilometers. Within half an hour, everything within tens of thousands of kilometers was shrouded in thick fog. Under the cover of the thick fog, the leaves began to rot rapidly, the trees quickly decayed, and the mountain rocks quickly turned into gravel. The mountains that were tens of thousands of meters tall began to collapse like sand sculptures that had lost their moisture. The rivers and lakes within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers also quickly turned dark green. The fishes and prawns in the sea and lakes all turned over and floated to the surface. The bodies of all the creatures in the forest began to rot rapidly. One had to know that these creatures were highly toxic to begin with. Many of them even had 7 or 8 types of toxins. However, under the poison dragon's third transformation, no creature could last more than a minute. From this, it could be seen how powerful the poison dragon transformation was. At the same time, Emosher's mind was flooded with messages. 3 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +3, 5 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +5, 9 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +9. 5 minutes later, the spam in his mind finally stopped. At this time, his dragon slaying points had reached more than 30,000. Dragon slaying points, 3011310000, you can be promoted. Do you want to promote now? Emosher's eyes lit up as he looked at it. His face and ears were red. With more than 30,000 dragon slaying points, he could definitely promote himself to a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon. This promotion will take 5 minutes. During the promotion, the host cannot use energy to fight. Please find a safe place as soon as possible. Before the system's voice died away, Emosher had already entered Earth's space. In Earth's space, he accelerated time again. In almost an instant, 5 minutes had passed. Promotion successful. Promotion requires 5,000 dragon slaying points. The host's current dragon slaying points are 29113. You can be promoted. Do you want to promote now? Emosher rubbed his hands excitedly. Of course, I want to promote. The next moment, the system's voice sounded in his mind again. This promotion will take 5 minutes. Emosher sped up the time again, and within a short 2 seconds, the 5 minutes had already passed. At the same time, the system's voice sounded in his mind again. Promotion successful. Emosher checked his level in his mind. Name, Emosher, level, rank 10 super evolved giant dragon, rank 1 mystic, ability. Click to expand, goal, evolve into an ancient giant dragon. Phew, Emosher let out a long breath. He had finally become a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon. As a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon, he could almost do whatever he wanted in the 10,000 dragon star zone. After all, in the past 100,000 years, there had never been an ancient giant dragon in the 10,000 dragon star zone. Therefore, a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon was the combat power ceiling of the 10,000 dragon star zone. Emosher had only been in the Become Dragon Star Zone for less than 2 years, and he had already reached the peak. If it were other protagonists in novels, they would have gone out to show off and embarrass themselves. However, Emosher had always been a cautious person. Although no ancient giant dragons had appeared, who knew if there would be any hidden ancient giant dragons? Therefore, even if he had reached the combat power ceiling, he would not go out to show off and embarrass himself. Of course, he would not always be a yes man and hide in a corner. If someone dared to ride on his head, he would make that person regret it for the rest of his life. At this moment, he looked at the dragon slaying points required to evolve into an ancient giant dragon. Dragon slaying points, 241131000000, ancient dragon crystal, 0 to 1, damn. Emosher could not help but exclaim. Just looking at the string of zeros behind the dragon slaying points made Emosher feel dizzy. The system explained very considerately frowny face there are 2 ways to evolve into an ancient giant dragon. The first way is to obtain 1 million dragon slaying points. The second way is to kill an ancient giant dragon and obtain 1 ancient dragon crystal. Emosher scratched his head. System, you directly changed the dragon slaying points from 5,000 to 1 million. Doesn't your conscience hurt? The system was silent and did not respond. Emosher shook his head helplessly and said again, for the second way, you want me to kill an ancient giant dragon. Does this mean that there are ancient giant dragons in the 10,000 dragon star zone? The system still ignored him. What AF * King Cold system? Emosher looked at the 2 methods carefully again. If he wanted to obtain 1 million dragon slaying points, there would have to be a war. Moreover, the death toll of a war within a planet would not exceed 1 million. Only in an interstellar war would the death toll exceed 1 million. However, if there was no special reason, would 2 planets have so much free time to start a war? Therefore, the first method would not work. Chapter 649. The first option, which was to kill millions of dragons, would not work for now. Therefore, Emosher set his sights on the second ancient dragon. However, as far as he knew, not a single ancient dragon had appeared in this world in the past 100,000 years. All the memories he had absorbed proved that there were no ancient dragons in this world. Therefore, the second option seemed even more unreliable than the first one. After thinking about it carefully, he still felt that the first option was slightly easier to achieve. Although this world did not have frequent wars, there would always be one every 1,000 years or so. With his current lifespan, he could live for tens of thousands of years. He could definitely wait. Moreover, even if Emosher could not wait for 1,000 years, he could still use other methods to kill these dragons. For example, right now, he could use his powerful strength to head to a certain planet and start a massacre. Of course, if he did that, he would quickly become the public enemy of the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. By then, he would probably be killed by the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone before he could evolve into an ancient dragon. He already had a preliminary plan in his mind at this moment. That was to establish an assassination organization. It was not as if there were no assassination organizations in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. These assassination organizations were paid to kill for others. Moreover, they appeared and disappeared mysteriously. It was very difficult to catch them. However, these assassination organizations adhered to one creed, and that was to never assassinate anyone from the government. Therefore, the government did not spend much effort to eliminate these assassination organizations. Some people even said that the government was behind these assassination organizations. However, this had never been proven. Of course, the government would never admit this. Emosher had already thought of a name for this assassination organization. It would be called the Lanling Association. And he would be the leader of the Lanling Association, the Lanling King. Moreover, he had already planned out how to operate it. With his current strength, he could create at most 500 clones. The power of each clone would be at the level of an 8th grade super-evolved dragon. Moreover, as long as they did not die, each clone could exist for at least 24 hours. When that time came, he would not need to find other members. He could do all the work himself. This way, even if the government investigated, there would not be too many clues. After confirming this point, Emosher's heart finally calmed down. He boarded the spaceship and left 10,000 Poison Planet. When the spaceship flew out of 10,000 Poison Planet's atmosphere, he saw the location of 10,000 Poison City. With the myriad Poison City as the center, everything within a radius of 10,000 kilometers had turned dark green. From space, it looked like a dark green spot. The next time a spaceship passed by, it would discover the abnormality of the myriad Poison Planet. However, this was not something Emosher needed to care about. After all, very few people came to myriad Poison Planet. Even if they did, so what if they were discovered? Even the government probably couldn't wait for the myriad Poison City on the myriad Poison Planet to be destroyed as soon as possible. Now that someone had done it for them, they couldn't be happier. Emosher used the Big Bug Bridge to return to the vicinity of Planet Cloud C. After another 2 hours of flying, he was finally back. When the Dean heard that Emosher had returned, he was extremely excited. Ever since Emosher left, he had been worried about Emosher. Emosher was finally back. At the same time, he was also amazed. How did Instructor Emo come back from the Myriad Poison Star? One had to know that ever since the Myriad Poison City on the Myriad Poison Planet was built, none of the giant dragons that went to the Myriad Poison Planet had ever returned alive. If the Master of the Stars knew that Emosher had not only returned, but also destroyed all the giant dragons in the Myriad Poison City, he would not know what to think. When the Master of the Stars, Kong Hai, heard that Emosher had returned, he immediately rushed to the Cloud Sea Academy. Seeing that Emosher was unharmed, Kong Hai was relieved. At the same time, he said to Emosher, "Instructor Emo, you didn't suffer any grievances over there, right? Don't worry. When the Cloud Sea planet develops, I will definitely lead troops to destroy the myriad poison planet. Emosure didn't say anything when he heard this. He just shook his head with a faint smile. Kong Hai knew that Emosure must have thought that he was joking. He quickly extended his right hand and promised Emosure, Instructor Mo, I am telling the truth. When the Cloud Sea planet's star power reaches that level one day, I will destroy the myriad poison planet first. I will avenge you, Instructor Mo. Emosure did not explain. He just nodded and said, okay, it's good that you have such intentions. The following days began to be peaceful again. Emosure continued to teach students and run cram classes at the same time. When he had free time, he had been secretly planning for the Lanling Association. Now, the plan was almost complete. Actually, he could already release the news and start accepting jobs. However, Emosure was in a bit of a dilemma about how to release the news. If you released the news that you were accepting jobs, people with ulterior motives might be able to track you down through the news. According to Emosure's understanding, many assassin organizations in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone had been destroyed because of this reason. Therefore, assassin organizations now usually had their own special contacts and secret codes. There was also a very strict vetting process and so on. Emosure definitely could not do it alone. After thinking about it, he felt that the Lanling Association needed an opportunity to make a name for itself. After that, he would think of a way to find a contact. However, Emosure was racking his brains on how to get this opportunity. Emosure did not want to do it anymore. He had always been afraid of trouble. In the end, he decided to leave this matter to Emma. In fact, Emma was quite good at organizing. Moreover, after Emosure kept throwing those dragon corpses into Earth's space and Emma drank their blood, Emma was now a super-evolved giant dragon. Moreover, she had evolved into a blood-type giant dragon that had never appeared in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. Her self-healing ability was extremely abnormal. Not to mention chopping off her head, even if only a piece of flesh was left, she could quickly recover. After she heard about Emosure's plan, she had been thinking about it in her heart. In the end, she had a joint plan in mind. However, this joint plan still needed Emosure to make a name for himself first. Of course, they needed an opportunity to make a name for themselves. They had to wait for such an opportunity now. Sometimes, when one was lucky, someone would give them a pillow. Half a month later, such an opportunity came. On this day, there was news. It was said that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea had been discovered in a certain star zone. As soon as this news spread, hundreds of nearby planets were instantly in an uproar. It was said that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea were places where ancient giant dragons used to cultivate. These places contained a large number of treasures, cultivation techniques, and secret manuals. If one could get one or two of them in the Starry Sky Deep Sea, it was very likely that they would soar. If they could get their hands on a cultivation technique or secret manual, they might become the top combat power of the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone in a short time. Chapter 650. 650 Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Forest. Legend had it that in ancient times, there were no planets or galaxies. In the entire universe, there was only one continent, which formed a vast expanse. Those ancient dragons lived on this continent. This continent was known as the Starry Ocean Continent. There were thousands of dragons living on the Starry Ocean Continent. Although the ancient dragons were born with great talent and strength, they still needed to cultivate. The oceans and forests of the Starry Ocean Continent were usually the places with the densest spirit energy. Therefore, many dragons would move to these places to live. Later on, there was a war in the Starry Ocean Continent that involved hundreds of billions of dragons. In this war, the Starry Ocean Continent suffered a devastating blow. Think about it, these dragons were all ancient dragons. It was imaginable how powerful they were. Emosure estimated that any random ancient dragon would be able to destroy an entire planet if they were still alive. How destructive would a battle between hundreds of billions of ancient colossal dragons be? Under their destruction, the starry ocean continent was split into countless pieces of different sizes. After tens of billions of years, these pieces slowly formed into planets. The forests and oceans of the starry ocean continent seemed to have some kind of energy that could not be destroyed. They floated in the universe and floated around. If one could get a starry sky deep sea or starry sky forest, they would benefit immensely. After millions of years, the starry sky deep sea and starry sky forest had been mostly excavated by the dragons. The starry sky deep sea and starry sky forest had not appeared in the 10,000 dragon starfield for tens of thousands of years. This time, they actually discovered the starry sky deep sea and starry sky forest at the same time. Of course, in order to prevent a greater war from destroying the 10,000 dragon starfield, they had a rule. The starry sky deep sea and starry sky forests that were discovered in the starfield would belong to that starfield. For example, the starry sky deep sea and starry sky forest were discovered in the Nanming region. Then, they would belong to the 650 planets in the Nanming region. Each planet could send 10 people to explore the starry sky forest and starry sky deep sea. How much benefit one could gain depended on one's ability. If a planet sent too many people, the government would intervene. After all, if there were too many people, the battle between them might cause the starry sky forest and starry sky deep sea to collapse. Their battle might even spread to other planets and eventually become an interstellar war. At this moment, the government had already controlled the entrance to the starry sky deep sea and starry sky deep sea. This was to prevent a certain planet from sending too many people over. When Kong Hai received this news, he immediately organized a group of people, intending to visit the starry sky forest and the starry sky deep sea. He selected 10 fifth-grade ultra-evolved dragons from the planet. This was the best lineup he could choose at the moment. However, at this moment, Emosher sent him a video call. Just pick 9 people. Leave the last spot for me. Kong Hai shook his head, no. Teacher Emo, you might not know this, but every time we discover the starry sky forest and the starry sky deep sea, it's basically a small-scale war. Moreover, this war was very cruel. If you go, it will be too dangerous. Emosher couldn't help but laugh. They should be the ones who are dangerous. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just leave me a spot. I promise I'll get the starry sky deep sea back for you. Kong Hai paused for a moment. The cultivation resources in the starry sky deep sea and the starry sky forest were extremely rich. If he could really take them back, then the strength of Cloud Sea Planet would increase by several times or even dozens of times. This was something he couldn't ask for more. After hesitating for a moment, he finally spoke, Teacher Emo, if we can guarantee your safety and take either the starry sky deep sea or the starry sky forest, that would naturally be the best. Emo sure smiled, not just one, but both of them. I'll snatch them back for you. Kong Hai was overjoyed when he heard this. That would be great. However, Teacher Emo, is your personal safety really not a problem? Emo sure smiled. Even Myriad Poison Planet can't do anything to me, let alone the starry sky forest and the starry sky deep sea. Kong Hai was slightly relieved when he heard this. That would be great. Teacher Emo, if you need anything, just tell me. I will definitely get it done. Emo sure shook his head. I don't need anything else. Just leave me a spot. Kong Hai nodded heavily. Don't worry, Teacher Emo. 2 days later, Emosher set off with the 9 4th-grade super-evolved dragons. In all honesty, 4th-grade super-evolved dragons weren't that strong in the entire Southern Star region. It was said that on the main planet of the Southern Star region, their Star Master was already a 7th-grade super-evolved dragon. On their planet, there were probably around 10 6th-grade super-evolved dragons. However, there was nothing they could do. Cloud Sea Planet was the most remote planet in the Southern Star region. They only had this much power. The 9 4th-grade super-evolved dragons didn't have much confidence in themselves. However, even if they didn't, they still had to go. After all, this was the Star Master's order. On the spaceship headed for the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea, Mo taught the 9 people the first and second dragon transformations. After these 10 days, these 9 people would become his strongest disciples. When that happened, any dragon they killed would be counted as his dragon slaying points. They flew for 2 hours, crossed 2 caterpillar bridges, and flew for another 10 hours before arriving near the Starry Sky Deep Sea and the Starry Sky Forest. In the past, the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea were discovered separately. However, this time, they discovered that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea were paired. The entrances to the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea didn't look very big. They were 2 black holes with a diameter of 10 meters. The 2 black holes were only 100 meters apart. There were 50 people guarding each side of the black holes. These 50 people were all wearing official dark matter armor. It was said that this dark matter armor contained extremely powerful energy. It could also absorb external energy. Wearing this dark matter armor would allow them to challenge enemies 2 grades above them. Moreover, this dark matter armor also used nanotechnology. It could freely change its form and wouldn't affect their transformation into dragon form. Of course, the cost of making this dark matter armor was also terrifying. The cost of making a dark matter armor was hundreds of millions of dragon coins. Moreover, you couldn't buy it even if you had the money. That was because creating this armor required dark matter origin. The only dark matter ore that had been discovered so far was controlled by the government. Mo asked them about it. The black hole on the left belonged to the Starry Sky Forest, while the one on the right belonged to the Starry Sky Deep Sea. After some consideration, he decided to go to the Starry Sky Forest first. Chapter 651. The cave on the left was the Starry Forest, while the cave on the right was the Starry Sea. Mo intended to go to the Starry Forest on the left first. Over 100 starry forests had been discovered over the past tens of thousands of years. However, no 2 starry forests were the same. Some starry forests were filled with blades and phantoms. Some starry forests were filled with the sun and moon, and the air was clear. Of course, this was only on the surface. All starry forests were different, but they all had one thing in common: they were all equally dangerous. Every time a starry forest was discovered, there would be at least 2,000 to 3,000 dragons entering, and at most 600 to 500 dragons entering. Less than 50% of these dragons would survive. However, if the casualty rate was so high, why were the dragons still fighting to enter the starry forest? That was because the discovery of ancient dragon ruins in the starry forest was of great significance to the entire planet. It was also a chance to change the fate of the dragons who discovered the ancient dragon ruins. Many of these dragons were not living the life they wanted. Even though they had reached grade 7 or grade 8, there were still many things that didn't go their way. That was why they wanted to change their fate by entering the starry forest and discovering the ancient dragon ruins. Of course, there were also some dragons who didn't want to live in the first place. They simply wanted to die. Wang Yi led the 9 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons and entered the starry forest through the left tunnel. After entering the tunnel, they realized that the tunnel wasn't as narrow as it appeared to be. In fact, if you walked more than 10 meters into the passage, you would feel that it was wide open. How was this a tunnel? It was clearly a massive rift, as if it were some sort of spatial rift. They kept walking forward along the spatial rift. There was no light source here, and they couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Even Mo.'s perception seemed to be useless in this place. There seemed to be no concept of time here. No matter where you walked, there was only eternal darkness around you. They walked along this dark tunnel for an unknown amount of time. Suddenly, a light appeared in the distance. Mo led the 9 4th grade hyperpolarizing dragons and sprinted in the direction of the light. However, even though the light didn't seem to be far away, it felt like it would take forever to reach it. Mo had no choice but to use teleportation. With his current ability, teleporting with 9 people would not be a problem, but the teleportation distance would be slightly shorter. Every time he teleported, he could only teleport 5,000 kilometers. After teleporting 7 times, the light finally became brighter and brighter. After teleporting 3 more times, the light became blinding. When he teleported for the 11th time, the scene in front of him changed again. The surrounding darkness had completely disappeared without a trace. This was a bright world. Green trees, green mountains, lush forests, and a sparkling sea. From the looks of it, this place seemed to be a paradise. Anyone who saw it couldn't help but want to stay here forever. However, no one dared to let their guard down. After all, no one knew what would happen in this strange world. Emosure had been using his draconic will to scan the surroundings. According to his investigation, this world did not seem to be as dangerous as he had imagined. Within a radius of 1,000 kilometers, other than the mountains and forests, there were many small animals. These animals were not large in size. Some were the size of rabbits, while the largest was only the size of a cow. Moreover, these animals did not seem to be aggressive at all. Even when Emosure used his draconic will to scan their bodies, he could not find any hidden claws or fangs. It seemed like all the animals here were herbivores. Apart from these animals, Emosure could not find anything else. As for the ruins of ancient dragons, there wasn't even a shadow of them. After searching for more than 3 hours, they finally found 10 giant dragons. Emosure had stolen the memories of these dragons and knew that they came from Centaurus. They were all 6th grade ultra-evolved individuals. They had arrived here 72 hours ago, yet they had not found anything after staying here for 72 hours. If there was anything different about this place, it would be that the daytime here was much longer than on other planets. It had been 72 hours since they arrived, yet it was still daytime here. The sun in the sky also seemed to be moving very slowly. At this speed, it would probably take another 240 hours for the sun to set. However, there were all sorts of strange things in this vast universe. It was very common for planets to have a few dozen or even a few hundred hours of daylight. Emosure had no intention of running into these people. He deliberately avoided the position of these people and flew towards the east. Well, in fact, Emosure did not know where he was. Here, the sun seemed to be hanging high in the middle of the sky, and it was impossible to distinguish north from south. Moreover, he did not know if this world originally had 4 cardinal directions. After 20 hours, they found another 4 or 5 waves of dragons. Some of them had been here for a few days, while the longest had been here for half a month. Even though it looked like they had only been here for a few hours to the outside world, they felt like they had been here for months here. In other words, there was some sort of dynamic force that had accelerated time here. However, even though time had accelerated, the sun was moving very slowly. It was obvious how slow the sun was moving in this world. Emosure plundered each and every one of their memories, but he still didn't find anything. In all of their memories, this world was always like this, and it was always so peaceful. However, this made Emosure feel more and more strange. What made him feel strange was not only that this world seemed to be always so peaceful, but also that these people were indifferent to this strangeness. This world had always been so peaceful, which was very strange, but they did not care about this strangeness at all. It was as if everything was supposed to be like this. This made Emosure feel even more strange. Emosure tried to steal the memories of the 9 level 4 super-evolved dragons that he had brought with him, but found that they were also indifferent to this strangeness. This made Emosure even more careful. He did not know how long he had been here, but he had seen at least 30 waves of dragons. Everything seemed to have always been so peaceful. However, at a certain moment, this peaceful world was broken. The seemingly eternal sun in the sky suddenly fell at an extremely fast speed. It quickly fell behind the mountain in the distance. At the same time, a bright moon rose. This bright moon was 100 times larger than the sun. Chapter 652. The dragons could sense that the sun had been hanging in the sky for several months now. Yet, now, it was falling at an unbelievable speed. After the sun fell, a huge round moon slowly rose in the sky in less than 5 minutes. This massive moon was dark red in color. At first, it only revealed a small part of its face like the sun. However, as it rose higher, the dragons began to realize its true form. It rose higher and higher, and grew larger and larger. In fact, they couldn't even see its full appearance. All they could see was the fat part of its body that resembled the belly of a giant worm. It hung in the sky like a giant's eye peering down at the earth, causing all the dragons to feel an inexplicable sense of fear. At this moment, everyone who had entered the starry forest lifted their heads to look at this strange phenomenon in the sky in fear. This situation lasted for 10 minutes. These dragons felt a sense of pressure from the bottom of their hearts as they looked at this massive sphere. It was so oppressive that they almost couldn't breathe. All of a sudden, something unexpected happened once again. The massive sphere in the sky suddenly fell toward the ground. Rumble. 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 As the sphere fell, rumbling sounds could be heard in the distance. The earth also started to tremble violently. All the dragons fled in all directions in panic. However, with such a huge sphere crashing down from the sky, where could you escape to? Rumble. Rumble. As the sphere fell to the ground, the radius of the explosion grew larger and larger. At first, only the bottom of the sphere was in contact with the ground. However, the radius of the explosion was increasing at a terrifying rate. The dragons within the radius of the explosion were devoured by the explosion without being able to put up any resistance. Some of the dragons used spatial escape methods. However, their spatial escape methods could only allow them to escape for a few thousand kilometers. However, the radius of the explosion was millions or even tens of millions of kilometers. Emoshure's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. The expressions of the 9 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragons changed drastically. They had anticipated all sorts of dangers before coming here, but they had never expected such an apocalypse. In their terror, they subconsciously turned to look at Emoshure. Emoshure was the strongest among them. If there was anyone who could save their lives, it would be Emoshure. In fact, Emoshure wasn't sure if he could save them at this moment. The only thing he could do was to bring all the dragons into Earth's space. With a thought, he brought himself and the 9 dragons into Earth's space. He had just brought all the dragons into Earth's space, and the next moment, the place where they had been was crushed by the huge sphere in the sky. The surroundings were instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. The 9 dragons, who had yet to recover from their shock, looked around in disbelief. They looked at Emoshure in surprise when they saw that their surroundings were calm and peaceful, and that they were in a completely different world from before. Instructor Emo, we are, Instructor Emo, that was, Emoshure shook his head, I'm not sure what that thing was, I just brought you guys into this space to avoid that apocalyptic disaster. It seems that we can avoid that disaster in this space. Earth's space belonged to another space that was independent of this universe. Therefore, it was not affected by the outside world. The level 4 super-evolved dragons were all relieved when they heard that their lives were not in danger. However, they still had lingering fears about what they had just experienced. I've read a lot of information about the Starry Sky Forest before, but I've never seen such a Starry Sky Forest. It's too scary, it's like the end of the world in this Starry Sky Forest. The other dragons that came in probably couldn't have escaped death. While the super-evolved dragons were discussing, Emoshure had already probed with his dragon's telekinesis. As he probed with his dragon's telekinesis, the outside world had already turned into a sea of fire. The huge celestial body had already disappeared, and the entire world seemed to have been destroyed. There was no longer any life in that world. Emoshure was also secretly shocked. He had thought that he was already very powerful since he had become a level 8 super-evolved dragon and mastered all kinds of 9 dragon transformations at the same time. However, compared to such a disaster, he was like a small boat in a storm, or a candle in a storm. He was so insignificant. After a while, he had created 100 doppelgangers. He let these doppelgangers go to the outside world to investigate. The 9 super-evolved dragons looked at Emoshur and the 100 doppelgangers and were all shocked. Some of them could create doppelgangers, but none of them could create so many doppelgangers. Moreover, these doppelgangers were much stronger than them. This made them revere Emoshur even more in their hearts. Seeing Emoshur's doppelgangers disappear into the air, they started to observe the world again. Some of them also had their own space, but it was far from being as big as this space. Their space was just a pitch-black storage space. However, Teacher Mo's space looked like a world of its own. There were mountains, water, animals, plants, the sky, and the earth. Compared to Teacher Mo's space, their space was like a child's toy. The doppelgangers that Emoshur sent out to investigate the outside world. That huge sphere had long since disappeared. There was only a huge crater with a diameter of several million kilometers left on the ground. There was only charred black in the huge crater. Although the destruction around the huge crater was not so serious, not even a blade of grass grew. The river from before had dried up. The forest from before had turned into a thick layer of black ash. The mountains from before had been flattened. As for the dragons from before, they had naturally disappeared. This world was so quiet that it was a little scary. There was not even a trace of wind. In the sky, the pale white sun hung there once again, motionless. When Emoshur's doppelgangers used dragon thoughts to investigate the surroundings, they found that there was no danger in this world. Emoshur furrowed his brows and pondered for a moment before leading the 9 Type 4 super-evolved dragons to the outside world. When the super-evolved dragons saw that the world had turned into hell, they were all dumbfounded. At the same time, they were secretly glad. Fortunately, Instructor Emo had brought them into that space just now. Otherwise, they would definitely die if they stayed in this world. Chapter 653. At this time, in this dead and scorched world, the pale white sun in the sky was hanging there motionlessly. Before, Emoshur and the others didn't feel that this sun was abnormal. But after what happened just now, the more they looked at it, the more they felt that this sun was strange. It seemed to be hanging there motionlessly forever, which always made people feel uneasy. Emoshur and the other 10 people began to explore this world again. Emoshur's clones had flashed thousands of kilometers away at this time. However, in the clones' exploration, all the surrounding places were scorched black, without any vitality. Just like this, they explored for many hours. In his exploration, more than 30 waves of dragons appeared. From the memories of these dragons, he knew that these dragons had just come in. Of course, in the eyes of these dragons, they might have been here for a few days or months, but when they came in, this was already a scorched world, so they should have come in before the planet fell. Emoshur ignored them and continued to explore. At this time, the sun in the sky began to fall rapidly again. Those dragons still didn't know what was going to happen, but Emoshur had already planned to bring the dragons around him into Earth's space. Sure enough, when the sun fell rapidly, a strange scene happened. Although the sun had set, the sky was very bright, unusually bright, even brighter than when the sun was hanging in the sky. Gradually, those dragons found that there was a focus in the bright sky, and that focus was getting closer and closer. Or it could be said that that thing was falling to the ground. This time, Emoshur took those dragons to hide in his Earth space early, and at the same time, he kept exploring the outside with dragon's thought. Soon that thing had fallen to the ground, but this time it didn't explode as soon as it came in contact with the ground like before. That thing was like a crystal with 2 pyramids at both ends. It was about 10 kilometers long, and the most protruding part was about 5,000 meters. It plunged into the ground diagonally, and the other end was only about 5 kilometers above the ground. It was quietly plunged into the ground, and other than that, nothing strange happened. Those dragons were very surprised. They all gathered around and looked at the huge pyramid that was more than 5 kilometers long. Out of curiosity, someone reached out to touch the pyramid. However, the moment he touched the pyramid, he heard a few cracking sounds coming from his body. Then, his entire body was frozen into an ice sculpture. The other dragons around were all shocked when they saw this. "Don't touch it," A slightly older dragon quickly roared, and the other dragons all took a few steps back. However, in the next moment, poof, a crystal-like vine suddenly protruded from a dragon's feet. The vine instantly pierced his thigh, and the next moment, his entire body turned into ice crystals. Then, puff 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 puff, terrifying sounds rang out one after another. Dragons were constantly pierced by the crystal vines and turned into ice sculptures. In just a few seconds, more than 20 dragons were turned into ice sculptures. Seeing this, the other dragons hurriedly flew into the sky. But at that moment, tree vines extended from the ice sculptures of the dragons. These crystal-like vines quickly rose and grew larger. In just a few minutes, they turned into a few towering ice trees. And these ice trees quickly multiplied and grew. In more than 20 minutes, countless ice trees grew within a radius of thousands of kilometers. So the temperature began to plummet. Looking around, the entire world had been covered in ice crystals. All the dragons who were lucky enough to escape before could no longer escape at this time. There was a world of ice and snow everywhere. Where could you escape to? Under the effect of the ice crystal trees, the temperature of the world dropped extremely low. Even those dragons could not withstand it. Some of them were wearing armor. Some were of the fire attribute. Some dragons were of the ice attribute and were immune to the ice attribute. However, it was useless. It seemed that all means were useless under the effect of the ice crystals that covered the entire world. Even if some escaped into their space, they found that their space had been frozen and exploded. In the end, all the dragons were turned into ice sculptures again. The 9 super-evolved dragons in Earth's space were all frightened when they saw this scene. They could not help but look at the space around them. However, the space around them seemed to be very solid. There was no sign of it being frozen and cracked at all. Instructor Mo, are we safe here? One of the dragons could not help but ask. Of course. Mo sure replied calmly. These people were relieved. At the same time, they admired Mo sure even more. In a situation where the outside world seemed to be destroyed, the other spaces were useless. However, Instructor Mo's space was safe and sound. This was really unbelievable. Next, various unbelievable natural disasters kept happening in the starry sky forest. Earth fire that could even burn the sky red. Floods that drowned the entire world. Mountain winds that could uproot huge trees. Thunderstorm clouds that split the earth and covered the entire world. In short, there were all kinds of disasters here. In these disasters, there were at least 1,000 dragons that died. Mo sure, on the other hand, could always escape unscathed by relying on his Earth space. After countless disasters, the entire world finally became peaceful. No more disasters happened. Looking around, this world that had experienced all kinds of disasters was full of huge pits. Mo sure led the 9 dragons in search of possible ancient dragon ruins in such a world. After walking for a long time, they seemed to have reached the end of the world. At this point, there were no more huge pits on the ground. Instead, it was very flat and endless. The strange white sun that seemed to never change in the sky finally did not appear again. Looking around, the world seemed to be the same color. It was the same chaotic color. In this chaotic sky, a dragon appeared. However, to Mo sure's surprise, it was not a Western dragon. It was an Eastern divine dragon. This divine dragon was bigger than any dragon that Mo sure had ever seen or imagined. Mo sure could only see its head but not its tail. In fact, he couldn't even detect it with probing. With Mo sure's current dragon consciousness, he could detect tens of thousands of kilometers away. However, he could not detect its tail. This showed that its body was more than tens of thousands of kilometers long. Just one eye alone had a diameter of tens of kilometers. Chapter 654. In the dead silence of the entire world, Wang Yi and the 9 rank 4 super-evolved dragons had been teleporting for an unknown amount of time. Finally, they came to a strange world. The sky and earth were the same. Looking around, they couldn't see anything else. The entire world seemed to be infinitely large, but also infinitely distant and empty. There was no sun, but they could see anything clearly. However, there was nothing here at all. There was no sun, no stars, no living creatures or things. There was only the vast sky and the vast earth. After walking here for an unknown amount of time, finally, something new appeared in front of them. This was an Eastern divine dragon. They didn't know how long or how big it was. Its eyeball was tens of kilometers in diameter. The entire dragon body was translucent, as if it was carved out of crystal. The scales, claws, and teeth on the dragon's body were all visible. Seeing such a behemoth, the 9 Type 4 super-evolved dragons were all terrified. This was the first time they had seen such a huge creature in their lives. They had heard of the giant astral beast before. However, no one had seen what a giant astral beast looked like. And now, this creature really existed in front of them. Energy surged in the 9 people's bodies, and they were on high alert. What is this thing? Instructor Mo, Instructor Mo, they subconsciously looked at Mo sure. In this world, they felt that every step was dangerous. And every time there was danger, it was Mo sure who helped them resolve it. So now that such a huge unknown creature had appeared in front of them, they naturally pinned their hopes on Mo sure. At this time, although Mo sure was also shocked, fear was only a small part of it. More than that, he was surprised. It was hard for him to imagine that in a world full of dragons, a creature from ancient Huaxia myths would suddenly appear. Divine Dragon. This had a huge impact on his worldview. And from what he knew, the size of a divine dragon was limited. How could it be so big? Could it really be as small as an earthworm and as big as a mountain just like in the myths and legends? Don't panic. Mo sure said to the 9 dragons. Once there was danger, he could instantly bring these 9 dragons into Earth's space. However, they waited here for more than half an hour, but the divine dragon didn't move at all. And stared at them without moving. Everyone felt numb from being stared at. They suspected that it was just a huge statue, but no matter where they went, the huge statue kept staring at them. It was as if he could see right through their hearts. In this vast world, this huge divine dragon, whose head and tail were nowhere to be seen, gave everyone a huge sense of oppression. It was unknown how long this situation lasted. Suddenly, one of the 9 super-evolved giant dragons behind Mo sure let out a roar that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Mo sure quickly turned around and saw that his right arm had turned into a sharp blade and pierced through the head of another super-evolved giant dragon. The super-evolved dragon's head fell to the sides like a watermelon that had been cut in half. All of the dragons were shocked. He's crazy. What's going on? It was fine, but now. Why did you suddenly attack? Everyone was shocked and terrified. Just as they were terrified, they saw that the super-evolved giant dragon who had killed someone actually raised his sharp blade and pierced it through his chin and out the top of his head. Everyone looked at all of this in disbelief. That guy must have gone crazy. He must have been unable to withstand the huge pressure here. This place is really too strange, too oppressive, so oppressive that it's driving him crazy. Hearing these 2 giant dragons say this, the other giant dragons became even more nervous. Indeed, facing a certain kind of extremely stressful environment for a long time could really drive people crazy. After the initial panic, the giant dragons gradually calmed down. However, this calmness didn't last long. Just more than half an hour later, another giant dragon directly transformed into a sharp claw and pierced it into his own eye. This caused everyone to panic once again. Mo sure knew that there must be something fishy about this. He immediately brought the remaining 6 giant dragons into Earth's space. When he explored the outside from Earth's space, he found that it was still a vast expanse. In the vast expanse of heaven and earth, there was a huge divine dragon. Mo sure tried to create doppelgangers to go to the divine dragon's location. However, without exception, these doppelgangers all committed suicide when they were more than 50 kilometers away from the divine dragon. From what these doppelgangers felt, Emo knew that they seemed to have been affected by some kind of psychological suggestion. Emo couldn't help but think, dragon psyche attack. He then thought of the various natural disasters from before. Planets falling, freezing, floods, fires, and so on. Emo became more and more certain of his thoughts. How could a planet suffer so many natural disasters in such a short period of time? The only explanation was that it was a dragon psyche attack. In other words, another dragon psyche had created such an illusion. Thinking of this, Emo's heart suddenly became clear. From the moment they entered this place until now, they had actually been in an illusion all along. However, at the same time, Emo was greatly shocked. To be able to create so many large illusions, the opponent's dragon psyche must be very powerful. At least with Emo's current demonic psyche, it was impossible for him to create so many illusions in the consciousness of so many people. However, now that he realized that this was an illusion, it would be very difficult for the opponent to use illusions to confuse him. Thinking of this, Emo's mind moved, and he arrived outside Earth's space. Sure enough, the scene he saw now was completely different from before. He saw that he was still surrounded by green mountains and clear waters. The forest was lush, and there weren't any large creatures in the forest. There were only some very gentle and small movements. It was exactly the same as the scene he saw when he first came in. At this time, a voice sounded, Did you see through my illusion? That voice didn't come from a certain direction, but from all directions. When Emo looked up, he saw that in the blue sky, some translucent things were gradually gathering together. As time went out of balance, those translucent things gradually converged into the shape of a divine dragon. It was almost exactly the same as the divine dragon that he saw before, whose head and tail could not be seen. However, in terms of size, it was much smaller than that divine dragon. This translucent divine dragon was only about 50 kilometers long. Well, this was actually already very big. There was one difference between it and the previous huge divine dragon, which was that this divine dragon was alive. It meandered in the air. Sometimes it soared into the sky, sometimes it dove down, sometimes it circled twice. Chapter 655. The huge transparent divine dragon stretched for dozens of kilometers and kept circling in the sky. Occasionally, it would let out a dragon roar that resounded throughout the world. If the divine dragon that could not be seen previously gave people a huge sense of oppression, this living divine dragon gave people a real deterrent force. Its eyes were bright, especially when it looked at Emo. Emo's heart could not help but tremble. You're a divine dragon. Emo said these words in extreme shock. Divine dragon? The divine dragon found it a little funny. What the hell is that? Then, you are, ancestral dragon. The winding divine dragon gave the answer. Ancestral dragon. Emo was very surprised. He had heard of the concept of ancestral dragon before. Above the super-evolved colossal dragon was the ancient colossal dragon. Above the ancient colossal dragon was the immemorial ancestral dragon. However, he did not expect this guy in front of him to say that he was an ancestral dragon. If the super-evolved colossal dragon could continue to evolve endlessly, it could eventually evolve into an ancestral dragon like the Eastern divine dragon. Ancestral dragon. Immemorial ancestral dragon. Emo felt that his question was a little awkward. Shouldn't he have asked more profound and philosophical questions? However, seeing a living divine dragon in front of him, his thoughts could not help but freeze. He could only ask such an idiotic question. What immemorial ancestral dragon? I don't understand. However, after waiting for millions of years, a kid like you has finally appeared. If your dragon psyche can be so strong, then your brain can definitely withstand my ancestral dragon soul. Very well, it's you. When Emo heard that, he immediately knew that things were not going well. This guy seemed to want to harm him. I've been here for millions of years, and I've been choosing the right person. Those illusions that I created were to choose the right person. The colossal dragons that died in those illusions were useless trash. Only the colossal dragons that can survive my illusions have strong enough dragon psyche to prevent their brains from collapsing when my ancestral dragon soul invades their brains. F***ck. Emosure could not help but curse in his heart. It turned out that this guy wanted to invade his brain. Possession? Emosure asked. Hee, little guy, you're pretty smart. It's a pity that your body will soon belong to me. With that, the huge transparent dragon flew towards Emosure. At this moment, he saw the scene he saw when he was injected with the genetic drug at the Earth base. The huge dragon opened its cave-like mouth and flew towards him. The only difference was that the dragon he had seen before was a Western dragon. This time, however, it was an Eastern dragon that was trying to devour him. To be exact, it was the soul of an Eastern divine dragon. The dragon's soul swallowed Emosure in an instant. However, from an outsider's point of view, it didn't look like the dragon had swallowed Emosure. Instead, it had drilled into Emosure's head. In Emosure's mind, the ancestral Gragon laughed maniacally. Ha ha ha. That's the feeling. Only such a strong brain can withstand my dragon soul. Then, his dragon soul quickly tried to devour Emosure's dragon consciousness. However, in the next moment, he suddenly screamed in horror, "Wait, how can your dragon consciousness devour my dragon soul?" When he was about to devour Emosure's dragon consciousness, he realized that not only was his dragon soul unable to devour Emosure's dragon consciousness, but it was also being devoured by Emosure's dragon consciousness. This made him extremely shocked. As the ancestral Gragon, his dragon soul was extremely huge. His dragon soul could transform into a divine dragon that was dozens of kilometers long and maintain it for millions of years without any changes. This was enough to show how powerful his dragon soul was. It could be said that Emosure's dragon consciousness was like a candle in the wind or a lonely boat in the sea in front of his dragon soul. It couldn't be any easier for him to devour Emosure's dragon consciousness. However, in reality, he couldn't devour Emosure's dragon consciousness at all. Instead, it was Emosure's dragon consciousness that was devouring his dragon soul. However, although he was terrified, he still didn't want to give up. He had waited millions of years for such a powerful dragon consciousness to appear. If it were any other giant dragon, their dragon consciousness wouldn't be so strong, and their brains wouldn't be so tough. They wouldn't be able to withstand his dragon soul at all. Although his dragon soul could exist for almost eternity, he could only stay in this world. He could only leave by borrowing the bodies of other giant dragons. He had stayed here for millions of years. He had stayed here for long enough. He wanted to leave. He must take this guy's soul and leave. Therefore, he didn't escape immediately. Instead, he continued to try to devour Emosure's dragon consciousness. He didn't believe that he couldn't devour this guy's dragon soul. However, the more he tried, the more terrified he became. No matter what method he used, no matter how powerful his devouring skill was, he couldn't devour Emosure's dragon consciousness at all. Instead, his dragon soul was being devoured by Emosure rapidly. After about half an hour, Emosure had already devoured 1/10,000th of his dragon soul. Even so, he still didn't give up. After trying for dozens of days, Emosure had already devoured 1/10,000th of his dragon soul. After trying for more than a month, when Emosure had devoured 1/100th of his dragon soul, he finally panicked. If this continued, he would eventually be devoured by this little guy. Therefore, he hurriedly tried to escape from Emosure's brain. However, he soon discovered in horror that Emosure's brain was like an extremely tough barrier, or rather, a prison. It was easy for his dragon soul to enter, but it was extremely difficult for him to leave. He used almost every method to escape. He even wanted to destroy Emosure's physical body to escape, but he couldn't do it. He begged Emosure, begging Emosure to let him go. He promised Emosure great benefits, allowing Emosure to coexist with his dragon soul in his brain. He also threatened Emosure that if he devoured him, the other 11 ancestral dragons would come back to take revenge on Emosure. In short, All the good words were said, and all the threatening words were also said, but Emoshur remained indifferent. It had been constantly devouring his dragon's soul. In fact, Emoshur had no choice. One of Emoshur's skills was called Dragon Will Devour. A dragon's soul was also a dragon's will, but it was tens of thousands of times larger than an ordinary dragon's will. When a dragon's will was strong to a certain extent, it was called a dragon's soul. Therefore, when that guy wanted to devour Emoshur's dragon's will, Emoshur's Dragon Will Devour was activated, and it instantly devoured him. It was impossible to stop this skill once it was activated. At the same time, after this skill was activated, Emoshur's brain was like a huge prison. It was easy to enter, but impossible to leave. After about 8 years, his dragon's soul was finally completely devoured by Emoshur. Chapter 656. The dragon's soul of the ancestral dragon was simply too massive. Emoshur had to spend 8 years to completely devour it. During these 8 years, Emoshur did not eat, drink, move, or shake. The only thing he did every day was devour, devour, and devour without stopping. The 9 grade 4 super-evolved dragons were getting impatient from waiting in Earth space. They sneaked out to investigate. In the end, they only saw Emoshur sitting cross-legged in the vast space, unmoving. No matter how they called out, there was no response. This made them wonder if Emoshur was dead. However, when they went to investigate, they found that Emoshur was still breathing. When they went to listen, Emoshur's heart was still beating. At this moment, Emoshur seemed to have entered a state of cultivation. However, this state of cultivation was deeper than that of ordinary dragons. Generally, even if a dragon was cultivating, it would respond to someone's call. However, Emoshur didn't respond at all. Happy and Emma were also very worried. They personally came out to check on Emoshur's physical condition. The grade 4 super-evolved dragons were very surprised when they saw Happy and Emma. They did not expect there to be others in Earth space. Humans. However, when they heard Emma's self-introduction and knew that Happy was Emoshur's woman, they hurriedly lowered their eyes. They did not even dare to look straight at her. They had seen Emoshur's power. In the face of the natural disaster that all super-evolved dragons could not avoid, Emoshur had brought them to Earth space and easily avoided the disaster. It was obvious how powerful Emoshur was. Naturally, they only had respect for Emoshur's woman. At the same time, they thought to themselves that only a woman like this was worthy of Instructor Emo. After checking on Emoshur's physical condition, Emma nodded at Happy. She meant that there was no problem. Happy also took a closer look and found that Emoshur's breathing and heartbeat were normal. Only then did he feel relieved. After that, these people came to observe Emoshur's movements every day. In fact, 3 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons would stand guard around Emoshur every day to prevent any other dangers. In the beginning, they didn't feel anything was wrong. But gradually, 1 month passed, and then half a year passed. Emoshur was still cultivating without moving. This surprised them. No dragon could cultivate for half a year without moving. Even the level 7 or level 8 super-evolved dragons would have to move once or twice a month. However, Emma knew Emoshur very well. He knew that Emoshur would often do some unexpected things. He also knew that Emoshur wasn't cultivating right now. As far as he knew, Emoshur had never cultivated before. And now, Emoshur was sitting there motionlessly. It was very likely that it had something to do with Emoshur's dragon will. However, she didn't know what the relationship was. She could only instruct those super-evolved giant dragons not to touch Emoshur, and at the same time, continue to protect Emoshur. This protection lasted for 8 years. 8 years later, on a certain day, those super-evolved dragons were still protecting him as usual. Although 8 years was a long time, dragons had a long lifespan. Especially for super-evolved dragons, their lifespan had reached tens of thousands of years or even hundreds of thousands of years. Therefore, 8 years was nothing to them. At this moment, Emoshur silently opened his eyes. He looked at the 3 super-evolved dragons and asked, How long has it been? His voice wasn't loud, but it gave the three super-evolved dragons a fright. They hurriedly turned to look at Immortal, only to see that Immortal had opened his eyes and was looking at them. 8 years, Instructor Imo, one of the super-evolved dragons replied. Immortal nodded, thank you for your hard work. He then slowly stood up. He had been sitting cross-legged for 8 years. However, when he stood up, his movements weren't stiff at all. It was almost as if he had just sat down. After standing up, he glanced at the vast land. It had been 8 years, but there hadn't been any changes. He knew that in the endless years to come, there wouldn't be any changes. This was also the reason why the ancestral dragon wanted to leave this place. Since the existence of dragons in the universe, the first dragon was the ancestor of all dragons, known as the dragon ancestor. The dragon group used his bloodline to create the 12 ancestral dragons. The bloodline of the 12 ancestral dragons was mixed with various other creatures, giving birth to many creatures with dragon bloodline. That was why there were various other dragons. In fact, the creatures with the purest dragon bloodline in the universe were only the 12 ancestral dragons and the one and only dragon ancestor. The ancestral dragon that Immortal devoured was besieged by the other ancestral dragons because of his bloodthirsty nature. However, they only managed to destroy his body. As for his dragon soul, it was difficult to destroy it. Hence, they locked the dragon soul in the Star Forest. If the dragon's soul wanted to leave the Star Forest, the only way was to seize another dragon's body and refine it into the ancestral dragon's body. However, in this universe, the dragon's dragon consciousness had become very weak. There wasn't a single dragon's dragon consciousness that could meet this requirement. They never expected that Immortal's dragon consciousness would meet this requirement. However, what was even more unexpected was that the ancestral dragon's dragon soul didn't devour Immortal's dragon imitation. Instead, it was devoured by Immortal's dragon consciousness. Now, Immortal's dragon consciousness was no longer a dragon consciousness. Instead, it was a dragon soul. In this realm, the dragon soul was the core. As for the body, it was just a shell. As long as there was a dragon soul, one would be immortal. At the same time, if the dragon's soul could find a suitable body, it would be invincible in the universe. Right now, Immortal's own body was the most suitable one for him. According to the ancestral dragon's memories, he only needed 10,000 years to refine his body into the ancestral dragon's body. The ancestral dragon's body was truly invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire. Only other ancestral dragons could destroy the ancestral dragon's body. In other words, after Immortal refined his body into the real ancestral dragon's body, only the other 11 ancestral dragons could hurt him. As for the 1000 dragon ancestor, after using his bloodline to create the 12 ancestral dragons, his bloodline was exhausted and he disappeared from the universe. Perhaps after billions of years, his dragon body had turned into space dust or a planet. No one knew. In short, the most important thing for Immortal now was to refine his body into the ancestral dragon's body as soon as possible. 10,000 years might be a long time for other dragons, but it didn't exist for Immortal. With a thought, he arrived on Earth. Chapter 657. Immortal entered Earth's space and accelerated time. 10,000 years passed within a minute. In these 10,000 years, he used the cultivation method in the ancestral dragon's memory to train his dragon body. In these 10,000 years, he raised his body from a rank 8 super-evolved dragon to the ancestral dragon realm. When he reached the ancestral dragon realm, he realized that there were other realms above the super-evolved dragon. After reaching rank 10 super-evolved dragon, the next realm was the ancient dragon realm. The ancient WIRMS continued to cultivate. Reaching rank 10 ancient WIRMS was their limit. It was basically impossible for him to advance any further. There was only one way, and that was to devour the dragon soul of the ancient dragon realm. In other words, if one wanted to cultivate to the ancient dragon realm, they would have to exchange all the dragon souls of another ancient dragon realm. Therefore, no matter how talented a dragon was, it was impossible for them to cultivate to the ancient dragon realm. Mo was lucky to have the system. Otherwise, he would have been taken over by the ancient dragon realm. Both Mo's body and soul had reached the level of a primordial ancestral dragon. In other words, he was 2 realms higher than the average super-evolved dragon. Previously, he was worried that there might be ancient dragons in the universe, so he kept a low profile. However, there was no need for that now. With a thought, he arrived outside Earth's space. The super-evolved dragons outside could not wait any longer. Only 6 of the 9 super-evolved dragons were left. This was because 3 of them had been killed in the illusion. Mo then led these people out of the starry sky forest. 8 years had passed. Mo thought that the starry sky and deep sea had disappeared. He did not expect the starry sky and deep sea to still be there. Since the starry sky and deep sea were still there, he might as well make a trip there. The official soldiers guarding the entrance to the starry sky and deep sea shook their heads when they saw Mo and the others about to enter the starry sky and deep sea. It's been 8 years. Even if there were any treasures in the starry sky and deep sea, they would have been taken away by others. You won't find anything if you go in now. The higher-ups have already given the order. In 2 days, all the official soldiers will be evacuated. This place is already a ruin with no value. Mo did not care. He had devoured the memories of the ancestral dragon, so he was very familiar with this starry sea. This sea of stars was where the ancestral dragon originally resided. In this residence, the ancestral dragon's weapon was a weapon of mass destruction. Moreover, there were many inheritances of the ancestral dragon in this sea of stars. Obtaining these inheritances would allow a large number of ordinary creatures to cultivate to become super-evolved giant dragons. Mo planned to bring the legacy items to the Flaming Dawn continent and let the people in the base use them. Mo had the 6 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragons wait outside the entrance. With a thought, he arrived at the deep sea of stars. The starry sky deep sea was an extremely large spherical sea. It was unknown how many tens of thousands of kilometers this sea stretched. It did not rely on any planets but floated alone in the universe like an extremely huge water droplet. There were thousands upon thousands of powerful creatures in this sea. Even the weakest of these creatures had the power of a 5th-grade ultra-evolved dragon. Some of the more powerful ones had even reached grade 10 super-evolved dragons. Moreover, these creatures liked to live in groups. There were as few as 2 or 3, and as many as hundreds or thousands. Therefore, the ultra-evolved dragons that came here to explore had to be extremely cautious. Otherwise, they would become food for these creatures if they were not careful. As soon as Mo arrived, he detected that there were more than 70 powerful creatures of various kinds swimming towards him within a radius of 100 kilometers. Mo shook his head helplessly. With a thought, he transformed into the ancestral dragon that was 100 kilometers long. This ancestral dragon was almost identical to the dragon god in Chinese legends. He wriggled through the sea, causing massive waves to rise. Long waves spread out. The creatures that thought they had found prey and were swimming towards him excitedly scattered and fled when they sensed the long waves. Mo didn't pay any attention to them. If it were 8 years ago, he might have played around with so many creatures after seeing them. However, his power was now 2 grades higher than theirs. He felt that playing with them was 2F** king meaningless. He wriggled and quickly swam deeper into the starry sea. He passed by a group of giant jellyfish along the way. These jellyfish had a radius of more than 10 kilometers. As far as the eye could see, they were all umbrella-shaped jellyfish. They were like giant light bulbs, flashing in the sea. Even a grade 10 super-evolved dragon would evaporate in an instant in such a group of jellyfish. However, when they saw Mo who had transformed into the ancestral dragon, they hurriedly fled in all directions as if they had seen the plague. Mo then passed through a cluster of underwater forests. These underwater forests were all made up of corals that were hundreds of meters tall. These corals were colorful and looked extremely beautiful, but they were all highly poisonous. Even a rank 56 super-evolved colossal dragon would be easily poisoned to death. After passing through the huge forest of corals, he arrived at the crater of a huge underwater volcano. This huge underwater volcano was still erupting. What it spewed out was not fiery red magma, but blue flames. He knew that these blue flames did not have any temperature, but as long as he came into contact with them, he would instantly be burned to ashes. From the crater of the volcano, about 100 kilometers down, there was blue lava. Mosher plunged his head into the blue magma. He reckoned that even the ancient WIRMS would have no choice but to retreat in the face of the blue lava. This blue lava could not only melt iron and stone, but it could also easily melt the hardest 10,000-year-old black iron in the universe. However, Mosher swam his huge dragon body and entered the crater of the volcano. This was what it meant to be impervious to fire and water. The blue lava was hundreds of kilometers deep. However, for Mosher, who was hundreds of kilometers long, it only took him a few seconds to pass through the lava. At this moment, a huge palace appeared below him. The entire palace looked like a naturally formed huge cave. This huge cave was tens of thousands of kilometers tall and had a radius of millions of kilometers. This huge cave was decorated in a grand and magnificent manner. Blue, green, and red fluorescent stones were embedded everywhere. There were also many tunnels in the surroundings that led to other smaller caves. Mosher's eyes widened. This was the residence of the ancestral dragon. This cave alone was enough for everyone on Earth to live in. And it was more than enough. Chapter 658. Mosher looked at the huge cave. The ancestral dragon's dragon soul scanned the surroundings and realized that the huge cave was hundreds of thousands or even millions of kilometers wide. It was hard to imagine that there would be such a huge cave. Such a huge cave was more than enough for all the people on Earth to live in. Mosher came to the center of the huge cave according to the ancestral dragon's dragon soul's memory. There was a circular pattern with a radius of thousands of kilometers in the center of the cave. This circular pattern was engraved with a very simple yet mysterious pattern. If an ordinary person looked at it, there would be nothing but the pattern. However, according to the ancestral dragon's dragon soul's memory, Mosher knew that there were thousands of ancestral dragons' inheritances hidden in the pattern. There were ancient memories, cultivation techniques, and even some weapons among the inheritances. These weapons were not made of metal or other materials. They were all energy. Once bound to the user's body, they could be nurtured by the user's body and eventually develop into the most suitable weapon for the user. Mosher's foot stepped on the center of the huge pattern. The next moment, spherical bubble-like spaces began to appear on the huge pattern. There were thousands of ancestral dragons' inheritances in these spaces. Mosher glanced at them. These spaces were different from the ones he had seen before. They should have been created by the ancestral dragon through some means. However, Mosher was too lazy to study them in detail at this time. With a thought, he kept the thousands of ancestral dragons' inheritances into his earth space. The next moment, the huge circular pattern began to glow with white light. The light became brighter and brighter, and Mosher seemed to melt in the light. The next moment, the scene in front of him changed. He came to a dark cave. It turned out that the huge circular pattern was also a teleportation array. As long as Mosher activated it with the dragon soul, he could be teleported to this dark cave. The ancestral dragon's weapon was hidden in this dark cave. This cave was not as big as the previous one, but it was not small either. Its radius should be thousands of kilometers. It was thousands of kilometers from the top to the bottom. There was a huge mountain in the center of this 1,000-kilometer-wide cave. The mountain was connected to the top and bottom of the cave. It looked a little strange. Hundreds of thick chains were inserted into the mountain and the other ends were inserted into the walls of the cave. It looked as if it was trying to lock down the mountain. Mosher couldn't help but frown. According to the ancestral Gragon's memories, this mountain was his weapon. However, there were no such chains in the ancestral Gragon's memories. With a thought, he tried to summon the weapon in the mountain. The mountain peak was also trembling with his summons. The surrounding chains rattled from the vibrations, but the vibrations were too light. It was impossible for them to collapse the mountain. According to Emosher's memories, he understood. This ancestral dragon had done too much evil in the past and was subdued by the other 11 ancestral dragons. His body was destroyed and his dragon's soul was poured into the starry sky forest. At the same time, his weapon was sealed in this mountain. It was impossible for Emosher to open the seal in a short period of time. The only way to open the weapon was to find the blood of the 11 ancestral dragons and drip it on the mountain. However, it had been 10,000 years. It was unknown if the 11 ancestral dragons were still around. Even if he could find the 11 ancestral dragons, it was also unknown if they would help him. He might not be the ancestral dragon from before, but who knew if they would believe him? Mosher tried all kinds of methods to destroy the mountain, but he realized that brute force would not work. With his current ability, he could easily destroy this huge cave, but the mountain peak would still stand tall and not fall. Helplessly, he could only give up on taking out the weapon. After all, with his current ability, he could do whatever he wanted in this universe even if he didn't use any weapons. As long as he didn't meet the 11 ancestral dragons, he was invincible in the universe. Thinking of this, Emosher shook his head. With a thought, he arrived at the entrance of the starry sky ocean. The 6 4th-grade super-evolved dragons were overjoyed when they saw Emosher arrive. Instructor Mo, you're out. Instructor Mo, are you alright? Emosher nodded and said, I'm fine. Then, with a thought, 6 bubble-like spaces appeared around him. There was a cluster of energy flashing in each space. Mosher said to the 4th-grade super-evolved dragons, you guys have worked hard to protect me for the past 8 years. Take these things back and study them yourself. As for how much you can improve, that will depend on your own luck. The 6 4th-grade super-evolved dragons were overjoyed when they heard this. They quickly knelt on the ground. Thank you, Instructor Mo. Thank you, Instructor Mo. Emosher did not say much, go back. The 6 super-evolved dragons quickly got up and reached out to touch the empty cannons. However, the moment they touched the empty cannons, they popped and disappeared like soap bubbles. The cluster of light in the empty cannons entered their bodies through their fingers. Some cultivation methods instantly appeared in their minds. At the same time, they realized that the cluster of light was actually a cluster of energy. This energy could be turned into an energy weapon according to the strength of the user's body, the degree of use, and the cultivation method. This energy weapon was more powerful than any other weapon in the world. This made the 6 of them overjoyed. They quickly followed Emosher and left. The government soldiers looked at each other when they saw this. They found the treasure. They found the treasure in such a short time. Moreover, it seems to be some sort of incredible treasure. They said that there was nothing inside, but I managed to find some incredible treasure in less than 10 minutes. Moreover, I gave one to each of the 6 of them. The government soldiers were all green with envy. However, they could only be green with envy. There was nothing they could do about it. However, there was a saying that there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall. News of this would soon spread throughout the South Light Star region. In truth, it wasn't that Emosher wasn't being cautious. Rather, there was no need for Emosher to be cautious now. I'm already invincible. Is there something wrong with my head if I'm still so cautious? Emosher then led the others to Cloud Sea Planet. Cloud Sea Planet was now under the rule of Konghai. The country was peaceful and prosperous. Over the past 8 years, Cloud Sea Planet had not experienced any war. Cloud Sea Planet had changed greatly compared to 8 years ago. However, Konghai was still brooding over the fact that his instructor Mo would never return. Chapter 659. Even though Cloud Sea Planet was at peace and all industries were developing in an orderly manner, Konghai still had one great regret in his heart. His instructor Mo would never return. It had been 8 years. There had been no news of him in these 8 years. Even as optimistic as he was, he didn't think Emosher could return. Meanwhile, Emosher's students at Cloud Sea Academy were all heartbroken. Their instructor Mo had left, just like that. He hadn't even left behind a single word. In these 8 years, they had all graduated from Cloud Sea Academy and entered various industries in society. However, they would often think of Mo in their free time. They would think of Mo's teachings and the various 9 dragon transformations that Mo had taught them. It was these 9 dragon transformations that made their abilities far more outstanding than the other dragons. It also made their status in society much higher than the other dragons. It also caused their gratitude and nostalgia for Mo to grow stronger and stronger. What saddened them the most was the fact that such a mentor would never come back. It was under such circumstances that Mo brought the 6 4th grade super evolved dragons back to Cloud Sea Planet. Mo didn't go to Kong Hai's residence. Instead, he went straight to the lakeside villa. It had been 8 years, but Lei Ren was still living in the lakeside villa. Mo scanned the place with his dragon's soul and found that everything in the room he used to live in was still in its original state. It seemed like Lei Ren was quite considerate. He scanned the place again with his dragon's soul and found that Lei Ren was still in Cloud Sea Academy. Lei Ren had now become an assistant instructor at Cloud Sea Academy. It hadn't even been 10 years since he had joined the academy. It was already impressive for other students to advance from 1st grade to 2nd grade in 10 years. However, he had become an assistant instructor in a single leap. It was all because of Mo's teachings. However, he would often think of Mo in his free time, just like the other students. Moreover, he thought of Mo far more often than the other students. After all, he lived with Mo every day. Moreover, he and Mo were both friends and teacher. Their relationship was much deeper than that of the other students. At this moment, the 6 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons had gone to the Star Lord's residence. One could only imagine how shocked and delighted Kong Hai was when he saw them. Before the 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons could say anything, Kong Hai's first words were, "It's great that all of you are back." The second sentence was, "Where's Instructor Mo?" Since these people had returned, Instructor Mo would definitely return as well. When Kong Hai heard that Instructor Mo had returned to the lakeside villa, he immediately dropped everything he was doing and rushed to the lakeside villa. When he saw Mo Kong Hai could not help but tear up. He had fought on the battlefield 10 times and never shed a single tear. When she saw Mo return, her eyes were already wet. He repeatedly invited Mo to stay in his Star Lord mansion, saying that the conditions there were much better than here. However, Mo was used to staying here and was not willing to move. Besides, Mo knew that since he had just returned, there would definitely be many people coming over. For example, the instructors of the academy and his students. If he moved to the Star Lord mansion, it would be inconvenient for them to move over. When Kong Hai saw that Mo was unwilling to move out, he decided not to force him. Over the next few days, just as Mo had expected, it was not just the instructors and students of the academy who came to visit Mo. Even some of the other forces on Cloud Sea Planet sent people to visit him. In the past, Mo would have preferred peace and quiet. With so many people coming and going, it made him very uncomfortable. However, he had stayed in the Forest of Stars for 8 years, and he had not seen many people in these 8 years. Now that he could see so many people, his mood was much better. At the same time, news of Mo obtaining a treasure from the depths of space spread throughout the entire South Bright Star region. Moreover, the news spread with great detail. Some even knew that Mo did not obtain any treasure, but the ancestral dragon's legacy. Mo found it strange that they knew so much. Apart from the 6 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons, no one else knew that he had obtained the ancestral dragon's legacy. How did they know? Mo scanned the area with his dragon soul. Now, his dragon soul was tens of thousands of times stronger than his dragon's will. With a simple sweep of his dragon soul, he could steal the memories of everyone in Cloud Sea City. However, he only stole the memories of the 6 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons. Through the memories of these 6 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons, he knew that it was one of the 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons who had leaked the news. That ultra-evolved dragon told his son about the legacy. His son then told his friends about it, and the news spread like wildfire. If it was in the past, Mo sure would have fled far, far away at this moment. However, the current Mo sure did not need to care about such things. He had already reached the realm of the ancestral dragon. Why would he care about these ordinary dragons? He continued to live his life as usual. The next day, the 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon who had leaked the news brought his son over. He kicked his son, causing him to kneel in front of Mo sure. Instructor Mo, it is my own fault for telling him about the ancestral dragon's legacy. I didn't expect him to tell his friends about it while he was drinking. That's why the news spread and brought great danger to you. Please punish me, Instructor Mo. The 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon's son also knew that he had caused great trouble. He knelt on the ground and trembled, not daring to say a single word. If it were 8 years ago, Mo sure would have killed this 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon's son. However, the current Mo sure did not need to do so. He waved his hand and said to the 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon, "You don't have to worry about that. There is nothing in the myriad dragon star region that can hurt me now. However, your son needs to be taught a lesson. He will probably cause a lot of trouble in the future if he continues like this." The 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon let out a sigh of relief when he heard this. He had thought that Mo sure would severely punish his useless son. If the punishment was severe, he might even kill his son. Even though he knew that it was his useless son who had caused this trouble, as a father, how could he not feel sorry for his son? After all, he only had this one son. Now that Mo sure had no intention of punishing him, he was naturally very grateful to Mo sure. "Don't worry, Instructor Mo. When I return, I will lock him up for 3 years according to the family rules." At the same time, the many forces in the South Bright Star region heard that Mo sure had obtained the ancestral dragon's legacy. They were all eager to make a move. At the same time, Kong Hai heard of this news and quickly sent people to investigate. At the same time, he set up defenses around Cloud Sea Planet to prevent those forces from attacking. Chapter 660. It had to be said that Kong Hai had great foresight. On the 3rd day after he strengthened the defenses around the planet, 3 forces arrived at the outskirts of planet Cloud Sea. According to the scouts that Kong Hai sent out, there were more than 3 forces heading this way. There were more than a dozen forces behind them, and they were all the top forces in the southern Dark Star region. Planet Cloud Sea was the most remote planet in the southern Dark Star region. In the past, these forces would not even look at planet Cloud Sea. Now, they were all heading here. Their goal was obvious. Kong Hai suddenly felt a little nervous. Even though he had been through many battles, big and small, and participated in no less than 10 battles, he had never encountered such a powerful enemy. Who were these forces? Sirius, Endless, Amaterasu. Sirius, Endless, and Amaterasu were the 3 most powerful planets in the southern Dark Star region. Of course, the officials of these 3 planets would not directly send people over. However, they would not stop the 3 forces from coming over to fight for the inheritance. The force on Sirius was called the Sirius Gang. The force on Endless was called the Endless Blades, an assassin organization. The force on Amaterasu was called the Amaterasu Association. The Sirius Gang, Endless Blades, and the Amaterasu Association were the 3 most powerful forces in the southern Dark Star region. They had branches all over the southern Dark Star region. However, planet Cloud Sea was too remote, so they did not bother to set up a branch here. When Kong Hai found out about this, he quickly gathered the officials for a discussion. However, after a long discussion, they did not come up with anything. After all, the enemy was too strong. It was said that the Sirius Gang, Endless Blades, and Amaterasu Association all had Class 8 super-evolved dragons. Due to the importance of this mission, even if they did not send out Class 8 dragons, they would at least be Class 7. Moreover, there was more than one of them. Against such a powerful opponent, how could a small planet like planet Cloud Sea defend itself? At this time, someone suggested that they look for Instructor Mo sure. Kong Hai nodded. In fact, the first person he thought of was Mo sure. However, he did not want to trouble Emosure with every matter, so he could not find a way to discuss it with the officials. However, it seemed that he could only look for Emosure now. Kong Hai personally came to Emosure's lakeside villa and told him about the current situation. Emosure didn't think much of it. Remove the defense and let them come over. Emosure only said these few words. He didn't say much else, but these few words reassured Kong Hai. He knew that Instructor Mo never fought an unprepared battle. Since Instructor Mo had asked them to come over, he must have a plan. Yes, Instructor Mo. I'll do it right away. Therefore, when those forces arrived at Cloud Sea Planet, they discovered that Cloud Sea Planet was completely defenseless. The vice president of Amaterasu Association laughed. He looked at the two leaders of the Heavenly Wolf Gang and Endless Battle Blade. The two of them also had smiles on their faces. They all had a tacit understanding. The way they saw it, Cloud Sea Planet knew that it couldn't withstand their attacks, so it had given up. Thus, the three of them ordered the gang members behind them to head straight into Cloud Sea Planet. The Heavenly Wolf sect had 10,000 members. Endless Blade had 8,000 players. Amaterasu organization had 10,000 members. They all headed into Cloud Sea Planet. Behind them, more than a dozen other forces also followed in. Even though it was impossible for them to get anything from these three forces, but what if? If the three forces ate meat, they should at least get some soup. They quickly arrived in the sky above Cloud Sea City. Just like the heavenly soldiers in Journey to the West, they didn't land on the ground at all. They just floated in the air above the city. The citizens of Cloud Sea City couldn't help but panic when they saw so many people flying over. What's going on? Is there going to be a war? Why didn't we hear anything about it? Damn, that's the Heavenly Wolf Gang. I saw their uniforms. And that's the Endless Battle Blade Gang and Amaterasu Association. All three forces are here. What's going on? What's going on? And there are over a dozen other forces behind them. I know. Didn't they say that someone on Cloud Sea Planet obtained the ancestral dragon's inheritance? Are they here to steal it? The matter of the ancestral dragon's inheritance had caused a huge uproar. The entire internet knew about it, so it was impossible for the citizens to not know about it. Why should the people of our planet give the ancestral dragon's inheritance to them? How shameless. Keep your voice down. You're finished if they hear you. In my opinion, we can't protect the ancestral dragon's inheritance at all. It's better to just hand it over to them. Even though they're shameless, there's nothing we can do. All rules are laughable in the face of strength. Just as the citizens were discussing, the vice president of the Amaterasu Association spoke. Planet Lord Cloud Sea, hand over the ancestral dragon's inheritance. Kong Hai had known about it a long time ago. He cursed in his heart. These bastards were 2F** King shameless. They'd agreed that anything found in the Star Ocean or Star Forest would belong to whoever found it. Now, these fellows were trying to take it from him. He condensed energy wings and flew up with over 100 guards. He faced the tens of thousands of people from the other forces. You're not following the rules. Kong Hai spoke as he glanced at the lakeside villa. Rules? The vice president of the Celestial Empire stroked his beard with a trace of ridicule in his eyes. We're all adults. Don't talk about rules and fairy tales. Rules are for the weak. The vice leader of the Celestial Wolf Gang spoke, hand over the ancestral dragon's inheritance or die. At this moment, a few rank 6 super-evolved dragons of the Endless Blade flashed and instantly appeared by Kong Hai's side. One on the left, one on the right, one on the front, and one on the back, they surrounded Kong Hai. The endless war blades in their hands were already pressed against Kong Hai's head and heart. This was the method of the Endless Blade. When they wanted to kill you, there was nothing you could do. The vice president of the Endless Blade only spoke 5 words, are you going to hand it over or not? In the face of such an enemy, the hundreds of guards around Kong Hai could not protect him at all. As for the citizens of Cloud Sea City, all of them had terrified expressions on their faces. There were even some cowardly ones who had collapsed to the ground. It's over. It's over. Cloud Sea Star is finished. If we don't hand over the ancestral dragon's inheritance, Cloud Sea Star will really be finished. However, right at this moment, a scene that shocked everyone happened. The arms of the 4 assassins who were pressing the endless blade against Kong Hai suddenly melted like blood coming into contact with fire. Chapter 661. The arms of the 4 assassins who were holding the endless war blade against Kong Hai suddenly melted like snow in fire. It melted like chocolate when it was heated. The most terrifying thing was that the 4 assassins did not even feel anything. They watched helplessly as their arms melted away, followed by their legs, their lower bodies, and finally their heads. All the tens of thousands of dragons witnessed this moment with their own eyes. They were all in disbelief. What was going on? They didn't see any attacks at all, nor did they see any defensive or counterattacking array formations. Why did they melt all of a sudden? The citizens of the city were flabbergasted by this scene. The tens of thousands of dragons in the sky couldn't help but feel a little panicked. They quickly scouted the surroundings, but no matter how they scouted, they could not find anything. Even the vice presidents of the Class 7 Super Evolved Dragons could not find anything. They pointed at Kong Hai and scolded, "Kong Hai, how dare you be so presumptuous? Are you trying to start a galactic war?" Kong Hai knew that Immortal had made his move, so he became firm. "Haha, what a joke. So many of you came to Cloud Sea Planet to steal. What's wrong with us defending ourselves? We are the ones who started a galactic war." Sure enough, the bigger the fist, the bigger the argument. "But I'm afraid your fists are not big enough today." Before he finished speaking, a figure appeared in the sky between the two sides. This person was dressed in black, and his face looked ordinary. His temperament also looked ordinary. If one did not look carefully, they would think that he was a very ordinary dragon. However, he was not ordinary because he was floating in the sky without any external help. When he appeared just now, he did not appear in an instant. Instead, he appeared in the sky slowly and silently. If he did not purposely let the other dragons see him, they would not have noticed his sudden appearance. He floated there as if he was one with the heavens and earth. He was nature, and nature was him. All the dragons sensed that something was wrong. The tens of thousands of invading dragons could not help but tremble. "You are..." The vice president of the Amaterasu Association hesitated for a moment before asking. The other dragons were also listening attentively. "The ancestral dragon's inheritance that you want is mine," Immortal said slowly. The president of the Amaterasu Society hesitated for a moment before saying to Immortal, "I see. I am Amaterasu, the vice president of Amaterasu Association. I'm not here to steal it, but I have been ordered by the higher-ups. Since you know why we are here, please hand over the ancestral dragon's inheritance. Otherwise, if the higher-ups come personally, I'm afraid they will bring an even bigger force than us. At that time, planet Cloud Sea will be destroyed." He knew that Immortal wasn't a pushover, so he used his powerful background to pressure him. Immortal smiled when he heard this. He couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on these people. With a thought, the president of the Amaterasu Society began to melt. Before anyone could panic, the president's body had completely melted and fell from the sky. Then, everyone from Amaterasu Association began to melt. One must know that the Amaterasu Association had sent over 10,000 people. But now, these 10,000 people were beginning to melt. When the rest of the forces saw this, they were all terrified. The vice president of Endless Blades saw this and knew that things weren't going well. He quickly ordered the 8,000 assassins behind him, "Retreat, retreat now." However, it was already too late. The moment he gave the order, his body had already split apart. That's right. His body didn't melt. It was torn apart. The assassins didn't even have time to run. Rip. 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 They were all torn apart. In just a few seconds, the 8,000 assassins had all turned into pieces of flesh and fell from the sky. When the Heavenly Wolf Gang's vice leader saw this, his eyes were filled with fear. He quickly crushed the space formation in his hand and tried to use it to escape. However, the moment the spatial array formation appeared, his body suddenly collapsed like a collapsing sand sculpture, instantly flowing down. The space formation around him collapsed and turned into a small black hole. Then, it quickly disappeared. The space formation was useless here. As for the 110,000 faction members behind him, they were like sand sculptures that had suddenly lost their moisture and collapsed in an instant. These 10,000 people were like grains of sand, drifting down from the sky. All the people below were dumbfounded when they saw this. They recognized the person in the sky. It was Instructor Mo. Wasn't Instructor Mo a 4th or 5th grade super evolved dragon? How did he suddenly become so powerful? He didn't even need to lift a finger to exterminate tens of thousands of people. As for the remaining forces in the sky, they were all dumbfounded at this moment. They had thought that with the 3 major forces here, they would be able to enjoy some soup while the 3 major forces ate the meat. But in less than 2 minutes, the tens of thousands of men from the 3 major forces had all been exterminated. They were still thinking about the soup. What was there to drink? In their terror, the leaders of several forces in the sky hurriedly begged Mo. Sure, Senior, please let us go. We deserve to die. How dare we offend you? Mo. Sure didn't wait for them to finish. He simply said, since you deserve to die, then die. As he spoke, he waved his right hand. Dark clouds instantly gathered in the sky. Bolts of lightning intertwined with one another amidst the dark clouds. Crack! 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 All of a sudden, tens of thousands of lightning bolts blasted downwards. In just a few seconds, they had struck the tens of thousands of dragons. All the dragons that were hit were instantly turned into charred human charcoal. The wind blew, and they were reduced to black powder that scattered into the distance. After doing all this, Mo. Sure slowly descended from the sky as if nothing had happened. He returned to his lakeside villa. At this moment, the civilians of Cloud Sea City who had witnessed all this were all looking in the direction of the villa. What grade was Instructor Mo? A 10th grade super evolved dragon. Even a tier 10 super evolved colossal dragon would not be able to kill so many people so effortlessly with so many methods. Could it be that he was an ancient dragon? That's right. He must be an ancient dragon. Heavens, they actually had an ancient dragon here. It was important to note that it had been tens of thousands of years since an ancient dragon had appeared in the Myriad Dragon starfield. They weren't the only ones who thought so. Even Kong Hai and his officials thought so. In truth, they couldn't be blamed for being ignorant. They had never heard of the ancestral dragon. Naturally, they didn't know that Mo. Sure wasn't an ancient dragon at all. Instead, he was an immemorial ancestral dragon, an immemorial ancestral dragon. Chapter 662. Mo. Sure had wiped out tens of thousands of dragons as effortlessly as blowing off dust. After that, he returned to the lakeside villa as if nothing had happened. He wasn't showing off, but after reaching the ancestral dragon realm, these dragons were just ants in his eyes. Did he have to show off after killing a group of ants? However, in the eyes of the residents of the Cloud Sea City, Mo. Sure was like a god. After all, even if a rank 10 super evolved dragon came, it wouldn't be so easy to kill tens of thousands of dragons. They didn't even see how Mo. Sure did it. After a long time, all the residents began to worship in the direction where Mo. Sure disappeared. They had believed in gods all their lives, but they had never seen one. Now, even if Mo. Sure wasn't a god, he seemed to have godlike abilities. At this moment, those who complained that Mo. Sure didn't hand over the ancestral dragon's inheritance were secretly nervous. Teacher Mo. was so powerful, he couldn't have heard what they said just now, right? If he really heard it, how would Teacher Mo. punish them? If Teacher Mo. wanted them to die, what could they do? The more they thought about it, the more afraid they became. These people worshipped Mo. Sure even more sincerely. In the Cloud Sea Academy, whether it was the teachers or the students, all of them were extremely shocked. They never would have thought that their teacher, who was usually just a teacher, would be so powerful. Many of the 6th grade students in the Cloud Sea Academy were stronger than their teachers, and these students had never seen Immortal fight in the academy, so many of them called Immortal the Water King. It meant that Immortal only knew theory and didn't know how to fight. The students he taught were indeed powerful, but his own strength was very ordinary. However, now that they saw Immortal's strength, they were all secretly afraid. Some students even wanted to challenge Immortal. Fortunately, they didn't. If they did, they would have been embarrassed. Lei Ren and the students under Immortal, even though they had more contact with Immortal and knew that Immortal was very strong, they were still extremely shocked. They knew that teacher Imo was very strong, but they didn't expect him to be so strong. This was almost beyond a level 10 super evolved dragon. At this moment, everyone was thinking that Immortal was an existence that surpassed a level 10 super evolved colossal dragon. He was an ancient colossal dragon. At the same time, Kong Hai removed his wings and arrived at the lakeside villa. As soon as he entered the lakeside villa, his expression was extremely solemn. Instructor Mo, we've killed the people from the various major powers. The major planets will definitely not let this matter rest. I'm afraid, Immortal waved his hand to stop him from continuing. Come at me. These 3 words were said very casually. If an ordinary person were to hear it, it would sound like a casual remark in life. It's going to be windy. It's going to rain. However, in Kong Hai's ears, these 3 words were filled with a domineering aura. At the same time, this also reassured him. Then, when the time comes, the people of Cloud Sea Planet will all rely on Instructor Mo. Immortal waved his hand. He gestured for Kong Hai to retreat. It had been 8 years since he had spent time with Happy. Now that he finally had time to spend with her, he was constantly disturbed by so many people and matters. This made Immortal a little unhappy. Kong Hai also understood Immortal's intention. He immediately bowed to Immortal. Then I'll take my leave first. When Kong Hai left, Immortal entered Earth's space and brought Happy and the other 2 out. He was now the ancestral dragon, invincible in the world. Even if the colossal dragons found out that the 3 of them were not colossal dragons, so what? Who would dare to do anything to them? At the same time, on Sirius Star. When the life signals of all the Sirius gang members disappeared, the Sirius gang leader received a report. He could not help but be furious. Who in the southern underworld star region dares to provoke the Sirius gang? Destroy Cloud Sea Planet. In the southern underworld star region, the Sirius staff was considered a colossus. There were more than 600 planets in the southern underworld star region, and the Sirius gang had branches on more than 500 of them. Their members had reached more than 500 million. The 100 planets that did not have branches were too remote for the Sirius gang to care about. If the Sirius gang wanted to destroy a remote planet, no one would dare to say anything. Even if the government saw it, they would only turn a blind eye. Soon, the Sirius gang leader personally led more than 1 million members to the remote Cloud Sea Planet on more than 300 giant battleships. At the same time, the same thing happened on Amaterasu and Endless Planet. The president of Amaterasu Association led more than 1 million members, while the president of Endless Blade led more than 700,000 assassins to the heart of Cloud Sea Planet. The Star Lords of Amaterasu and Endless Star region naturally received the report, but they did not care. It wasn't the first time that the few forces on their planet had destroyed other planets. In any case, after these forces destroyed the other planets, their Star Lords and their entire planet would obtain many benefits and resources. So, go ahead and destroy them all. At the same time, the government of the entire southern underworld star region naturally received the report. In the past, they would turn a blind eye to it, but this time, they directly closed both eyes. This was because these organizations had only destroyed the most inconspicuous planet. Cloud Sea Planet was too far from the center of the star region. The government rarely had the chance to manage it. Now that it was destroyed, it was peaceful. At the same time, the smaller forces from before were also very excited. They also sent out their members to chase after these 7 million dragons. This time, the 3 major guilds were going to destroy Cloud Sea Planet, and these smaller forces were going to follow. Even if they could not eat meat, they could at least drink soup. In the end, the total number of dragons reached 5 million. 5 million might not seem like a lot compared to the hundreds of millions of residents of Cloud Sea Planet, but these 5 million dragons were all at least grade 10 evolved dragons. In addition, their commanders were all at least grade 5 evolved dragons. In particular, the leaders of the guilds were all grade 8 evolved dragons. Therefore, this force was now the strongest existence in the Southern Underworld Star region. It could be said that in the Southern Underworld Star region, they would kill anyone who stood in their way. At this time, Cloud Sea Planet discovered all of this and quickly reported it to Kong Hai. The citizens of Cloud Sea Planet were terrified. It's over, it's over. Let's surrender. I know Instructor Mo is very strong, but no matter how strong he is, can he fight against an army of millions? The citizens were always like this. In the face of danger, they would not think or analyze carefully. Instead, they would follow the crowd. After Kong Hai received the news, he immediately went to find Mo Shi. After Mo Shi heard this, he still said the same 3 words, bring it on. Chapter 663. When Wang Yi heard that the entire southern Dark Star territory's 3.5 million soldiers were heading toward Cloud Sea, he only said 3 words. Come as you wish. On this day, thousands of battleships arrived near Cloud Sea. Each battleship was over 10 kilometers long. The thousands of battleships stretched for hundreds of kilometers. The 3.5 million dragons on the battleships were all very excited. Many people hated interstellar wars, but there were also many people who loved interstellar wars. For example, the dragons on the battleships. Almost all of them were warriors. In the 10,000 dragon star territory, warriors had no use during peacetime. Only when war broke out would these warriors be of use. Especially in large-scale interstellar wars, they would be even more useful. Now was the time for that. Moreover, as long as they won this invasion of Cloud Sea, they would be able to gain a lot of benefits. It might even be more than what they earned in their entire lives. As for losing, sorry, how could they lose? The 3 major forces of the Southern Dark Star territory had sent out their most elite forces. If they still lost, the 3 major forces would be too embarrassed to continue living. As for the rumors that a powerhouse had appeared on Cloud Sea, what a joke. How strong could he be? In the entire Southern Dark Star territory, the strongest powerhouse was an 8th grade super evolved dragon. There had never been a 9th grade super evolved dragon. Now that the 3 major star fields had sent out 3 8th grade super evolved dragons, how could they not deal with a single 8th grade super evolved dragon? As such, they were very confident in their victory in this battle. Brothers, if we win this time, how do you plan to spend your money? A dragon warrior asked. Do you still need to ask? Get a wife. Do we still need to get married? If we win the war, can't we just steal a wife from Cloud Sea? I'm old. I don't need to think about anything. The money I've earned this time is enough for me to retire. After I make a fortune here, I'll travel the entire 10,000 dragon star territory. I'll use the money I earn to buy cultivation resources and become a super evolved dragon as soon as possible. The battle hadn't even started yet, but they had already thought about how to spend their money. Gradually, the thousands of battleships approached Cloud Sea's spatial transfer station. The giant dragons of planet Cloud Sea had already received Kong Hai's orders. They quickly abandoned the space transit station and fled back to planet Cloud Sea. The warriors on the thousands of battleships were not surprised to see Cloud Sea leave for the transfer station. A single spatial transit station only had about 10,000 soldiers. In front of their army of 5 million, in front of their 1,000 battleships, they were even worse than ants. If they didn't abandon them, were they going to wait for death? After occupying the transfer station, their next step was to land on Cloud C planet. The thousands of battleships passed through the transfer station and arrived at Cloud C's orbit. Cloud C. After flying around the Cloud C planet 5 times, it slowly descended. Finally, black dots began to appear in the sky of the Cloud C planet. Gradually, the black dots grew bigger and bigger, and everyone could see that they were all giant warships that were 10 kilometers long. Seeing this, the people of the Cloud C planet panicked again. Oh no, they're coming. Isn't Instructor Mo very powerful? Why hasn't he shown himself yet? What a joke. Only 3.5 million came last time. There are so many this time. No matter how strong he is, can he kill so many? At this moment, the warship in the lead with a huge wolf head painted on it started shouting, "Brother Zhang. Cloud C, you have 5 minutes to hand over the ancestral dragon's inheritance. Otherwise, don't blame us for slaughtering Cloud C." He spoke the last few words in a very strict tone. Obviously, there was no room for negotiation. At this moment, Star-Lord Kong Hai and Mo Shi were watching all of this from the city below. Kong Hai asked Mo Shi, "Army's instructor, just tell me what to do." "I'll definitely do it. Just watch," Mo Shi said indifferently. In the next moment, his figure slowly disappeared. When he appeared again, he was in the sky, and he was over 10,000 meters away from the thousands of battleships. All the residents of the city were shocked when they witnessed this scene. Last time, Army's instructor Mo had appeared slowly just like that and destroyed a few tens of thousands of invaders. But this time, there were 3.5 million of them. Did Army's instructor Mo think he could destroy 3.5 million dragons by himself? The invaders in the battleships were also surprised to see a single dragon standing in front of their battleships. Who was this guy? How audacious! However, the leader of the Celestial Wolf Gang snorted coldly and waved his hand at a 7th-grade super-evolved dragon. Kill him. It didn't matter who it was. Let's show Cloud C who we are first. The 7th-grade super-evolved dragon nodded and gave an order to the battleships, "See that target? Fire at him." The next second, over 1,000 thick pillars of blue plasma shot out from the battleships. They almost instantly engulfed Mo Shi. The next second, when these pillars of plasma vanished, the place where Mo Shi had been standing had become a massive ball of light with a radius of over 10 kilometers. A massive explosion occurred in this ball of light, and it was earth-shattering. The air was distorted, and the ground was trembling. A ball-shaped shockwave spread out in every direction. Fortunately, Cloud C City was protected by a defensive array. Even so, Cloud C City, which was protected by the defensive array, continued to tremble. Just the shockwave from the explosion was already so powerful. It wasn't hard to imagine how powerful those pillars of plasma were. Yet, when the explosion ended, a silhouette was still hovering in the air. He didn't seem to be injured at all. Not only was there no damage to his body, but even his clothes were undamaged. The citizens of Cloud C City were overjoyed to see this. It seemed Instructor Mo was much more powerful than they had imagined. The hearts of the dragons on the battleships trembled at the sight of this. Every single one of those pillars of plasma was enough to scorch a 4th-grade super-evolved dragon's skin and flesh. The explosion caused by thousands of plasma beams could easily kill a Class 7 super-evolved giant dragon. Even a Class 8 super-evolved giant dragon would lose a layer of skin even if it did not die under the bombardment of so many plasma beams. Yet, this guy's clothes weren't even damaged by the bombardment of so many pillars of plasma. What kind of damned method did he use? While they were still wondering, Mo Shi's body started to change. His body was rapidly expanding, reaching a height of more than 10 kilometers in just 5 seconds. In another 5 seconds, he had reached 50 kilometers. In another 5 seconds, he had reached 100 kilometers. As his body grew larger, his body also underwent earth-shattering changes. A pair of horns appeared on his forehead. Chapter 664. As his body grew larger, Mosher's appearance changed as well. A pair of horns appeared on his forehead. The horns were like the antlers of a deer on earth. His head was like a camel's. His eyes were like a rabbit, his neck like a snake, his belly like an alligator, his scales like a fish, his claws like an eagle, his palms like a tiger, and his ears like a cow. Together, they formed a creature that the dragons had never seen before. The divine dragon of Huaxia. At the same time, the dragon's body was huge. It was over 100 kilometers long. The 10-kilometer-long battleships were like toys in front of this dragon. A creature that had never appeared before them, and it was so huge. This made all the dragons panic. Not only were the invaders panicking, even Kong Hai felt a fear that came from the depths of his heart quietly enveloping his entire body. As for the citizens of Cloud Sea City, they seemed to have a phobia when they saw this huge creature. All of them lowered their heads and crawled on the ground, not daring to look up. The invaders' faces changed drastically when they saw this huge creature. Not good, run! The leader of Endless War Blade quickly shouted. Retreat! The president of Amaterasu Association also exclaimed. Run! The leader of Celestial Wolf Gang exclaimed in disbelief. Just as they were exclaiming, the dragon slithered through the night sky. It did not have wings, but it was able to slither through the sky like a snake. In the next moment, his huge tail came crashing down on the fleet. The first to bear the brunt of the attack was the warship that the president of Amaterasu Association was on. The president of Amaterasu Association saw that he could not avoid the attack, so he quickly retreated outside of the fleet. In the next moment, there was a rumble. Mosher's tail came crashing down, and more than 20 warships in the fleet exploded. The dragons that were hit by Mosher's tail were instantly turned into minced meat. With a single swipe of his tail, more than 8,000 dragons were killed. This scene made the eyes of the dragons who had yet to die widen. They thought that by following the three major forces to invade this planet, even if they could not eat the meat, they could at least get some soup. However, they did not even get to see a drop of soup, and they were about to die. Mosher's tail had only managed to kill over 8,000 people. In the eyes of the other dragons, it was indeed terrifying, but Mosher was not satisfied. If this continued, when would they be able to kill all three? 5 million of them. His body snaked around the entire fleet. Then, it opened its cave-like mouth and faced the entire fleet. He let out a long howl. Roar, roar, a dragon's roar reverberated between heaven and earth. When all the creatures on Cloud Sea Planet heard the dragon's roar, they all fell to the ground and trembled. Even the sea of clouds above the sea of clouds began to churn violently. The residents of the city instantly turned ghastly pale when they heard the dragon roar, and all of them seemed to have been flabbergasted on the spot. Even if this giant dragon wanted to fly down and take their lives, they would not resist at all. The entire fleet was in an even more miserable state. With a single roar from Mosher, all the battleships in the fleet exploded. Boom 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 boom, under this roar, the bodies of the dragons in the battleship all exploded. Boom. 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 Even the super-evolved dragons, the president of the Amaterasu Association, the leader of the Endless Warblade, and the leader of the Celestial Wolf Gang, all of whom were 8th-grade super-evolved dragons, exploded as well. They were only 8th-grade super-evolved dragons, while Mosher's power had reached the level of an immemorial ancestor dragon. He was 2 grades higher than them. It wasn't excessive to kill them with a single roar. The bodies of all 5 million dragons exploded, turning into a rain of blood that rained down from the sky. In addition, the wreckage of the battleships continued to fall from the sky. Fortunately, there was a defensive array beneath the city that kept the wreckage of the battleships away. However, the rain of blood could not keep them away. The entire city was instantly enveloped in the color of blood. If one looked from above, they would see the entire city shrouded in a layer of crimson mist. Just a single glance at it was enough to instill fear in one's heart. Mosher had destroyed the entire fleet of 5 million dragons with a single attack. Pride rose in his heart as he raised his head and laughed. Oh! The dragon's roar reverberated throughout the world once more. The entire Cloud Sea planet felt the pressure of an immemorial ancestor dragon once more. As an immemorial ancestor dragon, destroying the entire Cloud Sea planet was only a matter of thought. However, Emoshur had no intention of destroying the planet. He wandered around the world for a while, stirring up the clouds in the sky. He then sensed the vast energy within his body. At this moment, his body and heart were radiating a domineering aura of supremacy. 5 minutes later, he finally finished wandering in the sky. He transformed into his human form once more and landed in the city. One had to admit that transforming into an immemorial ancestor dragon made him feel extremely comfortable. It was like going to a sauna. When the residents of the city saw Emoshur land in the distance, they remained prostrated on the ground, not daring to move at all. Although Emoshur had transformed into his human form, they had sensed the vast energy within his body. Just a dragon's roar was enough to make them tremble for a long time. Kong Hai waited for a few minutes before he walked over while trembling with fear. Mo. Instructor Mo, Emoshur waved his hand. Alright, clean up the battlefield. With that, Emoshur's figure flashed and returned to the lakeside villa. After he left, the residents of the city remained prostrated on the ground for a long time, not daring to get up. That mysterious and enormous creature was simply too terrifying. A few days ago, Emoshur had destroyed an army of over 30,000 by himself. They already felt that Emoshur was very powerful. But at least that was still within the scope of what they could barely understand. However, the strength that Emoshur displayed today had far exceeded their understanding. Such a gigantic creature, with such terrifying power, could exterminate 3.5 million dragons with a single roar. This caused all the dragons to be filled with fear. If someone were to say that this enormous creature could split a planet in half with just a tail, they would not doubt it at all. After a long time, someone slowly raised his head and said in disbelief, "Was that an astral beast?" I don't know. But I heard that astral beasts are very powerful and can easily destroy planets. Then it's very likely that he was an astral beast. But in the information I've seen about astral beasts, there's no mention of such a huge creature. At this moment, some students began to feel fear. They used to look down on Instructor Mo when they were in the academy. Now that they thought about it, they realized how stupid they were back then. Chapter 665. Emoshur had killed 3.5 million giant dragons in a single move. This caused all the residents of Cloud Sea Planet to be extremely shocked. Emoshur's strength had far exceeded their scope of understanding. In their eyes, Emoshur was no longer just a super-evolved giant dragon, nor was he an ancient giant dragon. As for what he was, they did not know. Perhaps only the word, God, could describe Emoshur. Thus, in the next 2 months, some high-ranking officials and nobles of Cloud Sea Planet would come to visit Emoshur from time to time. Emoshur did not refuse the visits of these high-ranking officials and nobles. They basically brought gifts when they came, and they knew that with Emoshur's strength, normal gifts would not be able to move Emoshur. Thus, they usually came to visit Emoshur with expensive gifts. One businessman gave Emoshur a villa. This villa was one of the best in Cloud Sea Planet, and it was located in the most prime location in Cloud Sea City. The prime location did not mean that it was the most prosperous area. There was an area at the edge of Cloud Sea City, and it was backed by a mountain and facing a lake. There were about 50 villas there. The villas here had elegant surroundings and a wide view. Furthermore, no one dared to disturb them. Each villa was worth tens of millions of dragon coins. Ordinary people did not even have the right to look at them, let alone think about them. The villa had 3 floors, and there were gardens and lawns around it. The total area was more than 2,000 square meters. It was quite luxurious to be able to live there. Moreover, it was very quiet, and it was the best for Emoshur, who liked peace and quiet. Thus, on the second day after receiving the villa, Emoshur brought Happy, Emma, and the others to live there. When Happy and Emma saw such a big villa, they were also pleasantly surprised. They also liked being able to live there without being disturbed by outsiders. After living in the villa, people sent Emosure flying devices, servants, and so on. In any case, as long as they were needed in daily life, they were all the best in Cloud Sea Planet. On this day, Emosure called Emma over and asked her to call her silly son over as well. In the end, Emosure placed his right hand on her son's head. The next moment, Emma's foolish son's eyes suddenly became clear. After a short while, her son's spirit seemed to have completely changed. After Emosure's hand left, Emma looked at Emosure and then at Emma. Then, he called out emotionally, "Mommy." Emma was stunned at first, and then tears flowed out of her eyes. Previously, it was only in Emosure's earth that his son could regain his intelligence. He didn't expect that his son, who was outside, had recovered. She pulled her son into her arms and hugged him tightly. Her greatest happiness was that her son could truly recover. Thank you, big brother Emo," Emma quickly thanked him. Emosure shook his head. "I've already said that I would help your son recover. It's just that I didn't have the ability in the past. Now that I have the ability, of course I have to fulfill my promise." Emma's son then said to Emma, "Mom, not only have I recovered, but I've also received the ancestral dragon's inheritance." Hearing this, Emma thanked Emosure again and bowed deeply. Emosure waved his hand. "Emma, you're one of the first few people to follow me. There's no need to thank me." Then, Emosure looked at Happy. "Happy, I've said before that I would find a way to make you speak. Although I don't have the ability now, we can travel the entire 10,000 Dragon Star region. I believe that there are thousands of planets in the entire southern underworld star region. There must be a way to make you speak again." Happy nodded. A pair of eyes that seemed to be able to speak looked at Emosure. It was as if he was saying, "Big brother Emo, I'll listen to you." From the first time he saw Emosure at the corpse farm until now, he followed Emosure to the 10,000 Dragon Star region. From when Emosure was just an ordinary corpse farmer to now, he was an existence that could easily destroy a planet in the 10,000 Dragon Star region. He always followed Emosure wholeheartedly. Being by Big Brother Mo's side always made him feel at ease. Even if he couldn't speak from the beginning to the end, he would be content. Moreover, they had been in the 10,000 Dragon Star region for so long, but they hadn't gone out to play. Now that Emosure was strong, it could be said that he was invincible in the entire 10,000 Dragon Star region. They could finally go out to play. Thinking of this, Happy felt very happy. At the same time, the news that Emosure had killed the 3.5 million people had spread throughout the southern underworld star region. Of course, they only knew that an expert had killed the 3.5 million people, but they didn't know who it was or how it was done. Even if the battleship they were on sent back images. When the people of these planets studied the images, they found that there seemed to be electromagnetic interference in the images. They could only see a blurry and huge shadow. Then, everything returned to normal. At this point, the planets in the southern underworld star region were all wary of the remote Cloud Sea planet. In the past, they looked down on the Cloud Sea planet. But now, the Cloud Sea planet seemed to have become the demon king of the southern underworld star region. Some of the giant dragons even felt like they were going to hell when they had to go to the Cloud Sea planet. At the same time, this news began to spread in the 10,000 Dragon Star region. Legend had it that there was an extremely powerful existence in the southern underworld star region that had destroyed an army of 5 million people. Legend had it that this powerful existence was a giant star beast that could transform into a human form. It could transform into a human form, and it could also transform into a giant. It had destroyed an army of 5 million people with a single slap. This was the terrifying part of the truth that was constantly distorted in the process of spreading. However, more than half of the people didn't believe this. After all, this was too incredible. They just treated it as a story. In the history of the 10,000 Dragon Star region, there had never been a giant star beast that could transform into a human form. Not to mention a giant. On this day, Immortal left the Cloud Sea planet with Happy and Emma. They went directly to the most central planet in the Southern Underworld Star region, the Southern Underworld Star region. On this planet, Immortal brought Emma, Happy, and the others to play while asking about Heaven's Sayers. He really did find out about Heaven's Sayers here. However, in the stories about Heaven's Sayers, there was basically a sentence like this: never let Heaven's Sayers speak. Immortal couldn't help but smile bitterly. Don't let Heaven's Sayers speak. Wouldn't that mean that Happy would never be able to speak? After leaving the Southern Underworld Star region, Immortal brought Happy and Emma to other planets in the Southern Underworld Star region and stayed for about half a year. In this half a year, they had almost visited all 650 planets in the Southern Underworld Star region and tens of thousands of other uninhabited planets. Chapter 666. In this half a year, Wang Yi brought Happy and Emma to every planet in the 10,000 Dragons star zone. There were 650 life planets inhabited by dragons and tens of thousands of uninhabited planets with harsh environments. However, they couldn't find any information on how to cure the oracle on these planets. Instead, they were constantly warned not to let the oracle speak. Other than that, there was no other information about the oracle. Immortal had no choice but to bring Happy and Emma to other star zones to search. On this day, they arrived at West Flame Star Zone. West Flame Star Zone was similar to South Bright Star Zone in that it also had 650 planets. There were tens of thousands of uninhabited planets with harsh environments. The main planet of West Flame Star Zone was called West Flame Star. Immortal brought Emma and Happy directly to West Flame Star. Most of the dragons on West Flame Star were fire elemental dragons. Especially on West Flame Star, 90% of them were fire elemental dragons. Their research on fire elemental could be said to have reached the pinnacle. The dragons of other star zones couldn't compare to the dragons of West Flame Star in their research on fire elemental theory and practice. At the same time, they had already used fire to the extreme in West Flame Star Zone. They didn't need to light their own fire to cook. Many of the machines that required energy didn't need any energy either. They directly used their own fire elemental energy. Even some of their small warships used their own fire elemental energy. Immortal and the others went directly to West Flame Star's main city, West Flame City. They asked around for information about the oracle here. After 2 days of asking around, they didn't find anything. They planned to stay on West Flame Star for another week. If they still couldn't find anything, they would go to other planets. On this day, Immortal and the others asked around for a long time and came to a restaurant to rest. This restaurant faced the river and was backed by a bustling street. It was really a good place. It was said that this was the best restaurant in the entire West Flame Star Zone. There were no private rooms in the restaurant, but there were more than 2,000 seats. Every seat had a view of the river. Immortal and the others ordered. After the dishes were served, they began to eat and drink while chatting. About 20 minutes later, they heard the noise of people downstairs. Then, 3 dragons who looked like young masters slowly walked up the stairs. These 3 young masters were all dressed in brocade robes. They looked like the kind of hedonistic sons of rich parents. The other dragons who were chatting excitedly while eating lowered their heads and ate silently when they saw the 3 young masters. The 3 young masters looked around and then sat down at the table next to Immortal's. How is it? Brother Wang, Brother Zhao. Are the girls you played with today hot? One of the young masters said. Right on time, right on time. Brother Sikong really knows how to play, ha 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 ha. Brother Sikong, when can we play again? Aren't you afraid of kidney deficiency? Young Master Sikong laughed loudly. That so-called Brother Zhao straightened his body. Don't worry, I, Zhao Wuji, may not be good at other things, but when it comes to women, if I dare to say that I'm third, no one would dare to say that they're second. Brother Wang smiled and asked, oh, if Brother Zhao is only second, then who is first? That Brother Zhao laughed and said, of course it's Brother Sikong. When it comes to playing, it still depends on Brother Sikong. I can only concede defeat. Ha 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 ha, that brother Sikong seemed quite proud. Well said, well said. Just as he said this, brother Zhao's gaze suddenly fell on Emma. Instantly, a look of amazement flashed across his eyes. When brother Wang saw this, he followed his gaze and looked at Emma. Then, he shifted his gaze from Emma to Happy. With this look, he and brother Zhao both revealed looks of amazement in their eyes. Brother Sikong saw that the two of them seemed to be a little dazed and couldn't help but be puzzled. What's wrong? Brothers. Only then did Zhao Wuji come back to his senses and said, Brother Sikong, the women we played with today are indeed not bad, but turn around and look at these two women. They're called high-quality women, right? Brother Sikong also looked back and couldn't help but be dazed with one look. Then, he turned his head and winked at brother Wang and brother Zhao. Brother Zhao, you asked when we'll play again? In my opinion, there's no time like the present. Let's play today. The two of them naturally understood what he meant and immediately got up and walked toward Immortal's table. Sikong came to Immortal's table and sized up Emma and Happy without restraint. Then, he said, looking at your clothes, you don't look like locals, right? Since you're guests from afar, I'll toast you. As he spoke, he picked up the wine cup on the table, filled it to the brim, and handed it to Emma. Beauty, drink this small cup, and young Master Sikong will bring you to taste the delicacies of the world. Big brother Wang and big brother Zhao surrounded Happy from behind. The surrounding diners all secretly sympathized with Immortal and the others. However, they didn't dare to make a sound and could only bury their heads in their food. Brother Wang and brother Zhao, on the left and right, wanted to press on Happy's shoulders. However, just as the two of them stretched out their hands instantly disappeared. They were eating here, and Immortal didn't want to make it too bloody and violent, so he directly used his spatial skill to cut off their arms. It wouldn't be too bloody. The two of them lost their arms, but they didn't feel any pain. However, this made them even more terrified. What's going on? Where are my hands? Where are my hands? They had never seen such a strange scene. It was as if no one had attacked them, but their arms had suddenly disappeared. At that moment, young Master Sikong also noticed the abnormality. When he saw the two of them lose their arms, he suddenly turned to look at Immortal. When Immortal saw that they didn't move, he knew that Immortal must have done it. How dare you attack my brother Wang and brother Zhao? Just as he finished speaking, both of his arms had already disappeared. Young Master Sikong's face instantly turned pale, and he was extremely terrified. How dare you attack me? I think you don't want to live anymore. Just as he said this, young Master Sikong's body had already split into two. Then, he instantly disappeared. At the same time, a figure instantly appeared in the air. This figure was dressed in black, and his face was covered by a black veil. Judging by his strength, he was actually a rank 8 super evolved dragon. Shadow Guard. When the diners who were eating saw this person, they immediately cried out in alarm. The Shadow Guard was the strongest organization in the entire Western Flame Star City. Their organization was similar to an assassin's organization, but they didn't kill people. Instead, they protected people. It was similar to security. As long as you paid them, they would protect you. It didn't matter if you were a good person or a heinous villain. Even in the entire Western Flame Star, the Shadow Guard was a famous security organization. Chapter 667. The Shadow Division got its name because they came and went without a trace. Not only were they elusive, but every single one of them was also very strong. It was said that the weakest member of the Shadow Division was a Grade 1 super evolved dragon. Just think about it. On the entire Cloud Sea planet, there were less than 10,000 super evolved colossal dragons. It was said that there were more than 100,000 types of Shadow Division members. And these 100,000 plus dragons were all super evolved dragons. It was obvious how powerful the Shadow Division was. It was said that the strongest Shadow Division member was a Grade 9 super evolved dragon. Among the hundreds of billions of dragons in the entire Western Flame Star Zone, the number of dragons that could reach Grade 9 could be counted on one hand. It was said that there were 4 Grade 9 super-evolved dragons in the Shadow Division. It was also because of this that the Shadow Division became the most powerful organization in the entire Western Flame Star Zone. The Shadow Division only cared about getting paid to do things. They did not care if you were a good person or a bad person. In this star zone where the strong preyed on the weak, it was obvious that the bad people were much richer than the good people. Therefore, most of the people the Shadow Division protected were bad people. Therefore, the Shadow Division was not a kind organization in the eyes of the people in the Western Flame Star Zone. Instead, it was an organization that worked for the bad people. Although everyone knew that most of the people he protected were bad guys, and the entire organization was equivalent to an evil organization, the people of the Western Flame Star region did not dare to voice their anger. No individual or organization dared to go against the Shadow Division. At this moment, the Shadow Division member appeared. The killing intent in his eyes was directed at Immortal. Young Master Sikong shouted at the Shadow Division member like a pig being slaughtered, "Kill! Kill him! Kill this bastard!" However, the Shadow Division member could tell that Immortal was very strong from Immortal's actions. Therefore, he did not attack directly. Instead, he said to Immortal, "Sir, can you spare young Master Sikong's life today? We Shadow Division members would be very grateful." This sentence was firstly to introduce themselves and let Immortal know their identity as Shadow Division members. Secondly, it was to let Immortal be wary of their identity and let young Master Sikong live. When he said this, the people eating around them were all surprised. That was because the Shadow Division was the most powerful organization in the Western Flame Star Zone. Even the government could make them angry. If a Shadow Guard wanted to protect or kill a person, there was no need to discuss with others. He could just do it directly. But why did this Shadow Guard want to discuss with this person? Young Master Sikong was even more furious. What's the point of discussing with him? Just kill him. That was because she didn't pay any attention to him. She just stared at Immortal with a burning gaze. Immortal was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. He waved his right hand. Shwa, the figure of the so-called young Master Sikong instantly vanished. The surrounding diners looked at each other in dismay. What a guy. She clearly knew that young Master Sikong was protected by the Shadow Guards. However, he didn't care at all and killed young Master Sikong with a wave of his hand. Moreover, didn't he know who young Master Sikong was? Could it be that this fellow didn't even care about the Shadow Guards, the #1 organization in the entire Western Yen Star Field? Wasn't this courting death? The Shadow Guard's face under the mask immediately turned ugly, and his gaze became extremely sharp. You won't have a good ending if you go against me. As he spoke, the Shadow Guard got up to leave. From Immortal's actions just now, he couldn't tell how Immortal had killed young Master Sikong. He didn't even know if Doomsday had used some spatial technique to trap young Master Sikong or kill him directly. Therefore, he knew that he wasn't Immortal's match at all. Moreover, not only was he not Immortal's match, he even felt that this guy in front of him was stronger than the 9th grade super-evolved giant dragons in the Shadow Guards. Could this guy be a 10th grade super-evolved giant dragon? Therefore, even if Immortal ignored him and killed young Master Sikong, he didn't dare to stay any longer. He immediately turned to leave. However, Immortal couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He looked back again. The Shadow Guard also disappeared. After doing all this, Immortal acted as if nothing had happened. He said to Happy and Emma, "Eat, eat. Eat more." The surrounding spectators were all dumbfounded. Too strong. This guy was really too strong. He actually attacked the Shadow Guard without holding back. He obviously didn't care about the Shadow Guard at all. It should be known that the Shadow Guard was the #1 force in the entire Western Yen Star Zone. Even if the super forces of the other star zones came, they wouldn't dare to be so unscrupulous in front of the Shadow Guard. Only the Central Star Zones organization, which claimed to be full of 10th grade super-evolved giant dragons, would dare to be so arrogant in front of the Shadow Guard. However, compared to the Central Star Zone, the Western Yen Star Zone was considered a very remote place. They wouldn't come to such a remote place. Then who was this guy? Which force did he come from? Why was he so strong? All of these had become a huge mystery, lingering in the hearts of these diners. After Emotion and Happy finished their meal, they slowly went downstairs. They slowly strolled around Western Yen City. They planned to wait for another 2 days. When they couldn't find any news about the Oracle, they would go to the other star zones. At the same time, the news of Doomsday destroying the Shadow Guard with a wave of his hand quickly spread throughout Western Yen City. Killing the Shadow Guard was a huge matter in Western Yen City. The speed at which the news spread was much faster than before. Soon, the entire city was talking about the Shadow Guard's death. Hey, did you hear? The Shadow Guard was killed. How could someone dare to kill the Shadow Guard? Does he want to die? It's true. I saw it with my own eyes. Young Master Sikong was also killed. What? Young Master Sikong was also killed. Young Master Sikong is the Star Lord's son. When Emotion and the others walked to the street and heard the discussions, they couldn't help but turn to look at Happy. Happy's eyes seemed to be able to speak as he looked at Emotion. It was as if he was saying, "Is it really okay to kill the Shadow Guard and that young Master Sikong?" Emotion gave Happy a comforting smile and said, "Don't worry. It's fine." This matter quickly reached the ears of the Star Lord, Sikongzhen. The Star Lord, Sikongzhen, was a rare giant lightning dragon. Moreover, he had reached 9th grade super-evolved. When he heard that his disappointing son had been killed, he was instantly furious. Although his son was a good-for-nothing, which father would be willing to see his son killed? He roared, "Pass down my order. Tell all the Shadow Guards to hunt down that guy at all costs." In fact, there was no need for him to give the order. The Shadow Guards had already started looking for Emotion in the city. In the entire Western Yen Star Zone, the Shadow Guards were the dignity of the Shadow Guards. No force or person dared to touch the Shadow Guards. In the past, the enemies of the people protected by the Shadow Guards could only retreat when they saw the Shadow Guards protecting them. Today, not only were their clients killed, even their Shadow Guards were killed. How could they tolerate this? Chapter 668. In the Western Flame Star region, it was extremely easy for the Shadow Guards to find someone. Moreover, Wang Yi had no intention of hiding his tracks. In less than 15 minutes, 300 Shadow Guards had surrounded Wang Yi and the others at a crossroad. It wasn't just the Shadow Guards either. There were about 500 subordinates of the Star Lord's residence as well. Not only did they surround Emotion and the others on the ground, but they also surrounded them in the sky. There was no chance for Emotion and the others to escape. The originally sunny street was now covered in dark clouds. The pedestrians hurriedly hid in the buildings on both sides of the street. The people of the Star Lord's residence were still manageable. The strongest among them was only a grade 8 super-evolved dragon. Most of them were below that. The Shadow Guards were different. They were all super-evolved dragons. More than 300 Shadow Guards were equivalent to more than 300 super-evolved giant dragons. No one had ever seen so many super-evolved dragons at the same time. More than 300 super-evolved WIRMs appeared on the street at the same time. The air within a 5-kilometer radius seemed to have solidified. Even though these super-evolved WIRMs did not attack, the oppressive feeling they brought was enough to suffocate ordinary people. Before these 300 super-evolved dragons and 500 warriors of the Star Lord's residence, Wang Yi, Happy, Emma, and Emma's son looked like 4 lonely boats in the middle of an ocean. They were also like 4 candles in a storm. They looked like they could be overturned and extinguished at any moment. Star Lord Sikongzhen of Western Flame had also rushed over after hearing the news. Sikongzhen had already become a grade 9 super-evolved dragon. He had been in a high position for a long time. He had an unparalleled aura of dominance and majesty about him. At this moment, he lowered his head and looked down at Immortal and the others. He let out a deafening roar. Who killed my son? I will kill all 9 generations of his family. At the same time, the leader of the shadow guards flew out from among them. It was a person completely covered in a black robe with a hood over his head. His face could not be seen at all. His voice was cold and sinister. Star Lord Sikong, this person killed my shadow guard. Please hand him over to me so that I can answer to the Star Lord. According to the rules of the Shadow Guardians, if a Shadow Guardian of a planet was killed, the Shadow Guardian leader of that planet would have to capture the murderer and report to the Shadow Master. Only by catching the murderer can you, as the leader of the Shadow Guards, atone for your crimes. Otherwise, the leader of the Shadow Guards would have to cut off one of his arms. From this, it could be seen that the Shadow Guards were very protective of their members. Because of this, the members of this organization had always been very loyal. Now that this leader was unwilling to cut off his own arm, he naturally had to capture Immortal and bring him to the Shadow Lord. At this time, Sikong Zhen was already furious. Blue and white lightning flashed on his body. His roar also seemed to be mixed with the crackling sound of thunder. But he killed my son. If I don't kill him today, I won't be able to vent the hatred in my heart. The Shadow Guard leader pondered for a moment and said, Star Lord Sikong, if you want to kill him to vent your anger, I can explain it to the Shadow Lord. I'm sure the Shadow Lord will agree to your request. So let me bring him back first, and then the Shadow Lord will hand him over to you. At this time, Sikong Zhen was furious. How could he care about this? Do you think I can still wait? Today, I will pull out his tendons, peel off his skin, and dig out his bones. Star Lord Sikong, please calm down. The leader of the Shadow Guards persuaded. Do you think I can still calm down? Where are the Star Lord's personal guards? The 500 giant dragons of the Star Lord's mansion immediately shouted in unison, Here. Go. Remember, I want him alive. I want to capture him and torture him. I want him to live a life worse than death. However, at this time, the Shadow Guards didn't need the leader's order. They all stepped forward and blocked in front of the Star Lord's personal guards. When the people in the buildings on both sides of the street saw this, they all secretly said in their hearts, that guy is finished. Whether it is the Star Lord's mansion or the Shadow Guards, they are all people he can't afford to offend. Now that he has offended all of them, his life is finished. Not only finished, his 9 generations will be exterminated. Didn't you hear? His 9 generations will be finished. I really don't know who gave him the courage to offend the Shadow Guards and the Star Lord's mansion. Both sides were discussing how to deal with Immortal, as if Immortal was already in their bag. At the same time, Immortal smiled faintly. He looked at the figures in the sky, then glanced at the figures surrounding him. Beside him, a bloodthirsty light flashed in Emma's eyes. Now that she had obtained the ancestral dragon's inheritance, she had evolved into a rare species that had almost never appeared in the 10,000 dragon star zone. In the past, she had to use her mouth to touch the opponent's body to suck their blood. Now, Emma had evolved to an extremely terrifying level. Not only had she reached the level of a level 10 super flower dragon, but her blood-sucking technique had also undergone a qualitative leap. Wang Yi knew what Emma was thinking. With so many super-evolved dragons around, they would be great nourishment for her. So he nodded at Emma, it seems that our method just now was too gentle. It's time to let them see a little blood. Emma immediately nodded when she heard this. She turned and looked at her son beside her. Her son had also obtained the ancestral dragon's inheritance and was currently cultivating. He was now a level 5 super-evolved giant dragon. He already knew about his mother's methods. At the same time, because he had obtained the ancestral dragon's inheritance, his horizons had been raised infinitely. Therefore, he was not at all uncomfortable with his mother's methods. Emma suddenly leaped up and stomped her feet on the ground. She instantly appeared in the sky. When she leaped into the air, the ground beneath her feet started to crack inch by inch because she had used too much strength to step on it. The shadow guards and the warriors of the Star Lord's mansion in the sky all spread out slightly. At the same time, they were also surprised. Emma had flown into the sky too quickly. She was so fast that they couldn't even see her clearly. It was also because of this that the shadow guards and the warriors of the Star Lord's mansion noticed Emma. They only knew that this man was very powerful. They didn't expect this woman to be so powerful as well. At this moment, Emma's body started to change. Her body started to grow rapidly. She didn't turn into a giant dragon, but a giant. She was a gigantic and sexy beauty that was 10 kilometers tall. Apart from her size, she looked exactly the same as Emma from before. However, at this moment, a pair of Blood Clan wings began to grow on his back. Chapter 669. In just a few seconds, Emma had transformed into a 10-kilometer-tall giant. She was a 10-kilometer-tall, sexy woman with a curvaceous body. A pair of large vampire wings sprouted from his back. The color of the wings was as red as blood, giving people a strong visual impact. The expressions of all the super-evolved dragons changed when they saw this. They were all super-evolved dragons. They could also reach a length of several kilometers when they transformed into their dragon forms. However, they had never heard of anyone who could reach a height of 10 kilometers in human form. In their shock, the dragons all transformed into their dragon forms. Every single dragon that transformed into a dragon was at least 700 to 800 meters long. Some were even several kilometers long. Their appearance instantly caused West Flame City to become extremely crowded. At this moment, Emma made her move. Hundreds and thousands of crimson tentacles suddenly emerged from Emma's body. These tentacles shot out in all directions like lightning. Pu-pu-pu-pu. Pu-pu-pu. Almost instantly, more than 50 giant dragons were pierced by these seemingly soft tentacles. Moreover, the blood in their bodies was rapidly absorbed by the tentacles after they were pierced. In the end, all 50 of these dragons turned into dried corpses and fell from the sky. It was important to note that the strongest of these 50 dragons had reached 5th grade super-evolved. Yet, even a 5th grade super-evolved dragon could not endure the attack of these tentacles and was instantly killed. Too strong, really too strong. The leader of the Shadow Guard's expression changed when he saw this. Judging from the aura that Emma had released earlier, he knew that this woman was no ordinary dragon. She was very likely a super-evolved dragon of a higher grade than him. A 10th grade super-evolved dragon. His expression turned extremely ugly when he thought of this. A 10th grade super-evolved dragon. That was an existence that even the Shadow Lord did not dare to provoke. It was said that the Shadow Lord was only a 10th grade super-evolved dragon. If a 10th grade super-evolved dragon was truly angered, even the Shadow Lord would not be able to do anything if the dragon started slaughtering the Shadow Guards. As a 10th grade super-evolved dragon, the Winter Lord could remain undefeated against a 10th grade super-evolved dragon. However, he could not guarantee that his subordinates would not be killed. That was the terrifying aspect of a 10th grade super-evolved dragon. Sikongzhen, the Star Lord of West Flame Planet, was also shocked. He was only an 8th grade super-evolved dragon. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the one who harmed his son would be a 10th grade super-evolved dragon. However, the trouble had already been stirred up, and it was too late for regrets. Moreover, he knew that these people were vicious and merciless. Begging for mercy was useless. His only chance was to escape while these people were not paying attention to him. In fact, that was exactly what he did. He activated a spatial teleportation device and wanted to take the opportunity to escape, but when he activated it, he couldn't escape at all. Usually, the spatial teleportation device worked every single time and almost never broke down. Why was it stuck at such a critical moment? Naturally, he did not know that this was because Emoshir had controlled the surrounding space. Although Emoshir's main attribute wasn't space, as a dragon that was proficient in all attributes, he had a good understanding of the space attribute. When Sekongjin wanted to escape, he had just activated the spatial teleportation device when he felt spatial fluctuations. Then, with a thought, the surrounding space was completely sealed. At this moment, not even an ant could crawl out of West Flame City, let alone a dragon. Just as Sekongjin was wondering what was going on, a crimson tentacle suddenly reached over. Pooh! It pierced through Sekongjin's heart. Sekongjin cursed in his mind. It was over. He could only feel the blood in his body being rapidly sucked dry by this tentacle. No! Don't kill me! Sekongjin let out a final scream, but it was already too late. All the blood in his body had been sucked dry by that crimson tentacle. Meanwhile, he had turned into a shriveled corpse with a horrifying appearance. He fell from high up in the sky and was smashed into pieces after landing on the ground. With Sekongjin's death, all of Sekongjin's imperial guards fell into chaos. They all fled in every direction as if their lives depended on it. However, who could escape from Emma's tens of thousands of tentacles? No one. In the end, all 800 dragons under Sekongjin's command were absorbed by Emma without exception. He then turned and stared at those shadow guards. Senior, we might have just had some misunderstandings before. Since it's a misunderstanding, let's all stop. From now on, you and I will mind our own business. There will be plenty of time in the future. Let's meet again. The leader of the shadow guards looked at Immortal and said. Naturally, he had already seen through it. Although this was a 10-kilometer tall female giant and was extremely powerful, the leader of these people was still that black-clothed young man who had been standing on the ground and looking up at the sky. Based on his experience, the leader of these people should be Immortal and not this 10-kilometer tall woman. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a crimson tentacle shot towards him like lightning. Immortal naturally wouldn't pay attention to him. Misunderstanding? King died a long time ago. You can't beat us now and you say it's a misunderstanding. If I was a little weaker and got caught by you guys, would you say it's a misunderstanding? That's simply the greatest shame in the world. Sekongjin still wanted to say something. However, a tentacle had already shot towards him. Sekongjin hurriedly leaped up to dodge. After dodging once, twice, thrice, Emma was infuriated. She no longer paid attention to the other opponents and concentrated all her tentacles on Sekongjin. Subsequently, about 300 crimson tentacles suddenly burst out from her body. These 300 crimson tentacles were no longer scattered like before. Instead, they gathered at one point and shot towards the leader of the shadow guards. The leader of the shadow guards still wanted to dodge by moving, but when he saw hundreds of crimson tentacles shooting towards him, he couldn't help but panic. He wanted to escape, but there was no chance for him to do so. Puff 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 puff, his entire body, head, legs, and arms were all hit by the crimson tentacles in an instant. It must be known that after reaching the 9th rank super-evolved giant dragon, their physical strength was extremely strong. Not to mention ordinary blades, even some treasured blades and swords couldn't hurt their skin at all. But now, these crimson tentacles easily pierced through him. It could be seen how powerful Emma's crimson tentacles were. Soon, the leader of the shadow guards was sucked dry and turned into a dried corpse. Then, the 300 over shadow guards were all easily killed by Emma. This was Emma's complete suppression of the giant dragons that were lower than her after her strength skyrocketed.